Chapter 1403. Xiao Su sat in the middle of the stage with a stack of papers beside his hand. On the papers were the orders given by the referee. As more and more papers appeared, the battle below became more and more intense. Sitting on both sides were high-ranking military officers. They took the papers and looked at the battle below. Many of them revealed the same confused expression as Hong Jianhua. Does this person not know how to fight? It seems like she's sending people to their deaths. The moment Lu Weiyin spoke, everyone agreed. Because Chu Qingyan had revealed her skills in the previous two battles, many people had a whole new level of respect for her. No one dared to look down on her anymore. But when they were prepared for battle, she used a disorderly marching formation. This made them deeply suspect that they had overestimated her before. Xiao Su glanced at the high-ranking military officers on both sides and curled his lips subtly. Then, he focused on the battle below. Many soldiers were taken off the stage. This was only a drill and not a real battle. So, the soldiers who went on stage wrapped their weapons in cloth. This way, they could ensure that they would not injure their opponents. But if they were hit in a vital point, they would have to leave the stage, indicating that they had died in battle. Comparing the two sides, Chu Qingyan's side had more and more people left the stage. The battle was one-sided, but her expression was still calm. She was not disturbed because of this. Hong Jianhua glanced at the battlefield. He had only lost 100 soldiers, but the other side had lost twice as many men. He believed that at this speed, he would be able to obtain a complete victory in less than an hour. When she saw the change in the battle below, she knew the other side's plan. She chuckled and was not in a hurry to reel in the net. She continued to use her diversion tactic. After an hour, Hong Jianhua discovered that his men were actually unable to take down all of her men. A trace of surprise flashed through his eyes, and he immediately looked at the battlefield. He saw that his men were surrounding and attacking Chu Qingyan's men. But her men did not fall, while his men fell one after another. He could not help but suck in a breath. What the hell is going on? While Hong Jianhua was still in shock, the two rows of generals on either side of Xiao Su also stood up, because the situation had suddenly become one-sided and the prairie was ablaze with lightning speed. Xiao Su sipped his tea and glanced at the generals beside him. His gaze was as calm as snow. It was time to let these subordinates see that military tactics were not so inflexible. Every time, they could find traces in military books. Only by using them flexibly and mastering them, and then catching them off guard, would they be able to laugh proudly in the end. Glancing at the battlefield, Chu Qingyan evaluated the troops on both sides and calculated the time. When she felt that it was about time, she stuck the small flag in her hand into the enemy's territory without hesitation and said, "Reel in the net." Soon, the side that was still being beaten up suddenly pounced on the opponent like a flood dragon, crushing the opponent's life in a crushing manner. How could this be? Weren't those people exhausted just now? Why do they seem to have changed their appearances? Wu Lin exclaimed, speaking the thoughts in Hong Jianhua's heart. They had clearly seen Chu Qingyan's people being exhausted, but now they were all ferocious like tigers, beating their opponents to the point of retreating. That's not right. Did you guys notice that little General Chu did not use those 200 people at all? Instead, they were placed at the side. Because the 300 people in front of her were fighting, we had neglected them. Jing Guanghui, who had participated in the Battle of the Southern Heavens with Chu Qingyan, looked at the battlefield below, and his eyes suddenly lit up. Because he was too shocked, the way he addressed Chu Qingyan was still stuck in the past. If General Jing did not mention it, we would not have noticed that those 200 people had not moved at all. That is to say, little General Chu used 300 people to fight against General Hong's 500 people. Fong Lu, who had been watching from the side, could not help but interrupt. He had always stood on Chu Qingyan's side. Even though he knew that she was a girl, he did not reject her because he knew that she was his master's helper. Therefore, he would only admire her and not have the same intense reaction as the others. Rather than saying that she was fighting, it was more like she was dragging them down. Xiao Su, who had been silent all this time, slowly opened his mouth to remind them. It seemed that these people had already started to reflect. Not bad. With His Highness' reminder, everyone finally broke their original train of thought. Thinking back to Chu Qingyin's plan from the beginning to the end, their faces became more and more shocked. From the beginning, this person had used an unmethodical method to exhaust the strength of General Hong's side. However, they saw it as her not knowing how to fight and seeking her own death. However, looking at it from another perspective, it was precisely because she did not follow the routine that she lowered the opponent's guard, causing them to step in her trap step by step. She dragged down 500 people and left 200 people to recharge. When the opponent was exhausted, she instantly attacked. So what if the opponent had the advantage in numbers? Didn't they still suffer a counterattack? When they thought it through, the sound of gongs and drums suddenly rang out. Everyone's faces changed. It was over so fast. The curtain on one side was pulled down, revealing Hong Jianhua's pale face covered in sweat. He had lost. He had lost. There had never been a time when he had lost so unexpectedly. On the other side, the youth slowly walked out while fanning himself. Although he was gorgeous, no one dared to look down on him anymore. They felt that he was weaker than a man. Instead, he made people feel fearful. How is this a rabbit? This was clearly a snow wolf, killing without spilling blood. The people below began to announce, General Hong's soldiers have lost 479 people. Only 21 people are left. Miss Chu's soldiers have died. That person seemed to have suddenly become stuck, so shocked that he could not complete a sentence. Old Lu, what are you stammering for? Hurry up and say it. Some impatient people impatiently urged. Old Lu took a deep breath and then loudly said, General Chu's soldiers have lost 56 people. Only 444 people are left. For a moment, there was a deathly silence. They could not believe what they had heard. Hong Jianhua staggered out, both hands holding the railing as he said in disbelief, How is this possible? She used so many people to drag down my people. How can there be so many people left? Old Lu helplessly pointed at the soldiers behind him. This is the truth. I also dare not believe it. At this moment, the soldiers who were still alive were standing there, full of energy, while the soldiers who were dead stood on the other side. There were hundreds and dozens of people. At a glance, it was incomparably clear. I simply dare not believe my eyes. How can this be? Someone raised this question. Instantly, everyone turned to look at the elegant youth who walked out from behind the curtain, eyes full of questions. Chu Qingyin, who had attracted everyone's attention, did not notice at all. At this moment, she was looking at the Chu clan's cheerleaders who had run to the center of the practice field and were dancing wildly. Being invincible is so lonely. Being invincible is so empty. Chu Qingyin covered her face. She really did not know these people. Chapter 1404. Best of 3. Chu Qingyin won. When Gao Hao made the announcement, no one had any objections, because the woman they had not taken seriously at all had used her valiant ability to crush their 3 generals without any pressure. No one suspected her of using any fancy tricks. She was so strong that it made people fearful. Everyone no longer looked at her with disdain and doubt. When all the generals gathered on the high platform, Chu Qingyin was greeted with gazes of admiration, shame, and shame. And Hong Jianhua, who had already accepted the fact that he had lost, pushed aside the crowd and impatiently walked in front of Chu Qingyin. Jin Xin thought that this person was going to renege on his loss and immediately stood in front of his master. Hong Jianhua was anxious and wanted to reprimand Jin Xin and leave. But he felt a chill run down his spine, as if a basin of cold water had been poured over him. He turned his head and met his lord's cold gaze. He couldn't help but tremble. Only then did he realize that his actions had caused a misunderstanding. He was not a person who could not accept defeat. He immediately cupped his hands and explained to Chu Qingyin, This general has no other intentions. I just want to ask young General Chu about the question of the number of casualties. This general is very puzzled. Why are there so many people left? This was not only Hong Jianhua's question, but also the question of everyone present. They all turned to look at Chu Qingyin, thirsting for knowledge, wanting to know the answer. When General Hong had been defeated, They had seen Chu Qingyin's tactics. While they were shocked and impressed, they also felt fear. She had actually used the lives of 300 soldiers as a stake. It was very bold and very vicious. If she had several times more people under her control and several times more enemies, wouldn't the price she had to pay be even greater? But the result was reversed. There were so many people who had survived. It was beyond imagination, and they had even won. Chu Qingyin called out to Jean Xin. Jean Xin understood and retreated behind her, while she looked at Hong Jianhua with a faint smile. Military strength is the foundation of war. This Chu is not a cruel person who only wants to win without caring about the lives of the soldiers. Unless there is no other choice, I will not use a strategy that harms 1,000 of the enemy and 800 of my own men. Chu Qingyin's words were clear. Because she was on the high platform, and because she did not suppress her voice, it spread to every corner of the platform. The soldiers gathered around the high platform heard it clearly. When they saw her move just now, everyone was worried that if she stayed in the army, she would become a cold-blooded and ruthless leader. If she sacrificed them for victory, that would be too terrifying. At this time, they couldn't help but be comforted. They felt that, as a superior, it was already very difficult for her to think for them. They admired her even more. Chu Qingyin's words were meant for the people below the platform to hear. She was afraid that in the eyes of the army, she would become the Azura from hell. Chu Qingyin continued to explain to Hong Jianhua with a smile. As for why there are so many people left behind, it is because this Chu had already instructed them before going to the battlefield. Their goal is to exhaust your strength and make you tired. As long as this goal is achieved, it is fine. There is no need to fight to the death. At the critical moment, it is more important to save your lives. If you're injured, you can play dead. That is why we conserve our strength. There is no such thing as war. She did not find it embarrassing at all to let the soldiers play dead. In the face of life and death, what was face and dignity? Chu Qingyin's words refreshed the worldview of the soldiers present. The people on the platform were all experts in war and were not people who stuck to the rules. After hearing her words, it was as if their conception and governing vessels had been opened, and they suddenly had a new understanding of military formations. War was the way of deception. Xiao Su glanced at the enlightened expressions of his subordinates and slowly curved his lips. The little fellow had won 2 rounds in a row, so the outcome was already decided. There was no need for a third round. But he had always felt that the more battles they fought, the more mediocre the style of his generals became. In the long run, there were only disadvantages and no advantages. He needed someone to break this situation and bring in a new source of power. The little fellow was a good candidate. And the little fellow also wanted to test the methods of his subordinates. The two of them had the same idea and continued to compete in the third round. The result was just what he wanted. That graceful figure entered his sight, and a faint smile flashed across Xian Mo's eyes. He had not misjudged her. Good. Young General Chu is indeed brave and resourceful. This general apologizes for his previous rudeness. Hong Jianhua stepped forward and bowed with his hands clasped in front. With Hong Jianhua as an example, the rest of the people immediately cupped their hands and apologized. Young General Chu, please forgive us for our previous offense. Young General Chu, please forgive us. Now everyone had changed the way they addressed her. The people who came from the army were all straightforward. They were not like the civil officials who were scheming. They said whatever was on their mind. Right was right, wrong was wrong, and they were not pretentious. Previously, when they heard the rumors, they thought that this woman was Hu Mei. This time, when they came to help the prince, they were already prepared to break off relations with the royal family. If they were to be affected because of this person, then wouldn't they be banging their heads against a wall? However, they did not expect that this person was not only not a burden, but also a help to Lord. Whether it was strength or intelligence, she was far above them. How could they care about whether she was a man or a woman? At this critical moment, one more talent meant one more strength, and one more strength meant one more chance of winning. When a person reached such a level of strength, in their eyes, it was already beyond gender. And this was beyond Chu Qingyin's expectations. She originally only wanted to stay in the army in this way, so that no one would object and not make things difficult for Big Ice Block. But she opened the folding fan to cover the smile on her face. It was an unexpected gain. Everyone, there is no need to blame yourselves. If it were me, I would do the same. I am very happy that you can recognize my ability. This Chu is honored. Chu Qinyin did not put on airs. In the future, they would all be your colleagues. It was very important to have a good relationship in the office. Only by being harmonious could they go further. She had such a powerful ability, yet she was humble and gentle. This made everyone feel relieved, and they immediately started chatting with her. The scene became lively all of a sudden. After a while, after enjoying the happy scene, Xiao Su suddenly spoke. The competition is over, and the results are out. This matter has come to an end. However, a country has its laws, and an army has its rules. Since little General Chu had disguised herself as a man to participate in the Battle of the Southern Heavens, this prince should give you an explanation while everyone is here. When these words fell, everyone was surprised and looked at each other. Gao Hao stood up. Lord, let's just forget about this matter. Young General Chu has won many battles for the Sichuan. Her ability is outstanding. Now that we're in need of people, we can let bygones be bygones. Xiao Su raised his hand to stop him from speaking. He calmly looked at the person surrounded by the generals and said indifferently, Yin, what are you going to do? Chapter 1405. Chu Qingyin raised her head and met those deep eyes. Under the inexplicable and nervous gazes of Jean, Xian, and the others, she slowly revealed a row of neat little teeth. Listen to your highness. Those eyes were calm, and no one could guess what he was thinking. They only heard him order, tie her up. As soon as he finished speaking, everyone gasped. This woman had disguised herself as a man to sneak into the army camp and fight with the army. If she was really investigated, even beheading in public would not be enough to offset her crime. She might even implicate her family, and at least 9 generations of her family would be executed. They did not understand why Lord would choose to investigate Chu Qingyin's crime at this time. Although this was in line with Lord's ruthless style, they were no longer so angry about her disguising herself as a man. Looking at Chu Qingyin tied up by a thick rope, everyone wanted to say something, but they were intimidated by Lord's pressure and stopped. However, their Lord had already stood up from the main seat and walked to the edge of the high platform. Because they did not deliberately lower their voices, the people below had already heard their words. At this time, Xiao Su's movements slowly moved to the front of the high platform. In other words, the army of 100,000 had unknowingly gathered below the high platform. Chu Qingyin walked to his side under the signal of the soldiers behind her and looked down at the soldiers below with him. Because she had used less than 4 hours to finish the 3 rounds of competition, the sun was very bright and dazzling at this time. She narrowed her eyes and looked at the strange and surprised faces. Although she did not know what the people beside her wanted to do, her heart was calm. Xiao Su raised his hand, and the noise instantly disappeared. The 100,000 pairs of eyes below looked at him in reverence. He pointed to the person beside him and said in a deep voice, Recently, there has been a rumor in the army. What it is about, everyone knows in their hearts, so this king will not say much. The person standing beside this king is the main character that you're talking about. That's right, she is a woman. She has disguised herself to stay by this king's side and has once led the army into battle. However, the army has its rules and women are not allowed to enter the army. Not to mention, pretending to be a man is an additional crime. The army should be strictly governed, otherwise it will be hard to convince the people. Without rules, nothing can be accomplished. Today, this king will give everyone an explanation in front of everyone. These words were clearly to punish Chu Qingyin. When Jean Xian, Su, Yi, and the others saw this, they couldn't help placing their hands on their waists. As long as Xiao Su dared to touch their master, they would definitely pull out their swords and fight to the death. Because their master was Chu Qingyin, not him. Even if master had a close relationship with him, when it came to a choice, They would only stand by Master's side and would only listen to him. On the side, Huoling's expression changed when he saw this. He immediately pressed down on the sword in Jin Xian's hand and glared at him. "What are you doing? Why aren't you making them put away their weapons?" "Huoling, we will not let anyone hurt Master." Jin Xian was indifferent as he coldly looked at him. Huoling was angry. "Anyone in this world can hurt the little princess, but only my master will not. Don't be impulsive and believe in my master." Jin Xian looked at his master, who still had a relaxed expression. After a moment of silence, he raised his hand to have the others stop. If something happened, Master would naturally call them. Huoling gave a sigh of relief when he saw this. But when he turned to look at Master's tall and straight back, he really could not understand what his master was thinking right now. Xiao Su took in all the expressions of the people below, but he did not give them time to react. His eyes darkened as he raised his voice and slowly spoke in a voice that everyone could hear. "This time, this king will not be biased, but before condemning them, this king must introduce them to you all due to your misunderstanding of this person's identity. This woman is called Chu Yan. Her real name is Chu Qingyan. She is the princess consort that this king has yet to marry, as decreed by the retired emperor and personally bestowed by the emperor emeritus." When these words came out, everyone was in an uproar. Even the group of generals beside Xiao, Su, all changed expressions. When they heard the rumors, they thought it was a seductive woman who had popped out of nowhere. They never thought she would have this kind of identity. They felt even more guilty and blamed themselves than before. It was them who had gauged the heart of a gentleman with the yardstick of a villain. Xiao Su looked at everyone's reaction, and his expression did not change. He continued, "At that time, the Battle of Southern Song had begun. The situation was dangerous, and dozens of cities had fallen. There were very few people at this king's side that could be used. It was Chu Qingyan who volunteered to lead the army to resist the enemy and save the people from the fire and water. So there was this kind of story behind it. Rumors were really harmful. At this time, they looked at Chu Qingyan on the stage. She was clearly elegant and refined with a gentle and kind appearance. How could someone say she was a seductive beauty? The person who spread this rumor should be punished with death." However, Xiao Su did not give them time to react. His tone changed as he said in a deep voice, "However, this is still against the rules and deceive the people and the army. It is a disgrace to everyone's trust in this king. So today, this king will place righteousness before family. Chu Qingyan has committed this crime and should be executed according to the law." When these words came out, there was a moment of dead silence, but quickly became noisy again. "General, you can't. General, please have mercy." A few days ago, the people who wanted to denounce Chu Qingyan were now anxious and agitated as they pleaded for mercy. Chu Qingyan stood quietly at the side. She originally treated herself as a spectator and did not get involved, but now she seemed to be affected by everyone's emotions. Her brows moved slightly, and she was surprised. She could not help but turn to look at the cold and cheerless big ice cube. Hong Jianhua had already treated Chu Qingyan as one of his own. At this time, he could not help but stand up and say, "General, young General Chu disguised herself as a man at that time as an expedient measure. Special circumstances should be dealt with differently. Moreover, she has made great contributions and saved the people from the fire and water. This general feels that her merits can offset her faults." Wu Lin, Gao Hao, and the others also stood up and cupped their hands to plead. "General, young General Chu is a rare talent. Today, everyone has seen her ability and is full of admiration. If she can stay in the army, it will be like adding wings to a tiger. General, please be lenient with her punishment. General, we should not pursue this matter. Let's forget about it. General." Xiao Su acted as if he did not see everyone pleading for mercy and turned to look at the little fellow. "Do you know your crime?" Hearing this, Chu Qingyan glanced at the people who were looking at her nervously. She smiled and then calmly knelt down in front of the army. "Qingyan knows her crime. Good. In order to prevent others from saying that this prince is biased, this prince will personally execute the punishment. Xiao Su pulled out the sword of the guard beside him with a swish. The silver light was dazzling. When he finished speaking, Hong Jianhua immediately knelt down. General, rules are dead, people are alive. General, please have mercy and spare young General Chu. Gao Hao, Jingguang Hui, and the other generals also knelt down and said in unison, General, please have mercy and spare young General Chu. Then there was a sound of kneeling below the stage. 100,000 soldiers shouted in unison, General, please have mercy and spare young General Chu. Suddenly, the whole world was echoing with this sentence. It was like the sound of a drum and bell, deafening and not dispersing for a long time. Chapter 1406. Chu Qingyan could not keep her calm at this time. She looked at everyone in a daze, not knowing how to react for a while. There were pleas in her ears and soldiers kneeling in front of her. It would be a lie if she said she wasn't moved. However, at this time, the sword in Xiao Su's hand was already above Chu Qingyan's head. But without anyone noticing, he reached out to pinch her cheeks before pulling back. Everyone was anxious. Their gazes were fixed on the sword that was suspended in midair. Their pleas for mercy were like an avalanche that could topple mountains and overturn seas. Jin Xian and the others did not care about Hua Ling and the others' dissuasion as they pulled out their swords to go forward. Chu Qingyan turned to shake her head at them, indicating for them not to act rashly. Jin Xian and the others could only grit their teeth and pull back their weapons before retreating. His eyes swept over the kneeling people, and a light flashed in Xiao Su's eyes. He suddenly raised his voice to cover the deafening pleas. This king is not a heartless person. Although Chu Qingyan has made mistakes, her original intentions are good. At the same time, she has done many meritorious deeds, so her merits offset her faults. So, Xiao Su said this as he lifted a strand of her long hair. Then he raised the blade in his hand. I'll cut off your hair in place of your head. Without a sound, the strand of black hair had already fallen into Xian Sei's sleeve. The moment he raised the blade, no one dared to breathe. Only when the blade fell and she was still fine did they dare to breathe. In Chu Qingyan's days, there were cheers that covered the previous one. General is wise. General is wise. Xiao Su personally reached out to untie her and then helped her up. He stood beside her and faced everyone. Yesterday's crimes have all been removed. There will be no more Chu Qingyan disguised as a man in the future. If this king hears anyone talking behind their backs again, they will be dealt with according to military law. Yes, as long as Chu Qingyan was not punished, it was fine no matter what. Chu Qingyan turned slightly to look at the person beside her. At first, she did not know what the ice cube was planning. However, after so many years of chemistry and trust in him, she listened to him without any reservations. She did not doubt him at all. Even if he held a knife to her head, she would never change her mind. Until this moment, she couldn't help but smile. He didn't let her down. It turned out that everything he did was to help her clear the obstacles and remove this time bomb. Thinking about it, in the future, no one would offend her because of this matter. This was her big block of ice. How could she not love him? Suddenly, she felt her hand warm as it was wrapped in a large palm. She couldn't help but be stunned. Then, she struggled unnaturally and whispered, "Don't be like this in public. You're the commander-in-chief. It's not good if people see you. It wasn't easy for me to get rid of the suspicion of being a vixen, so don't try to frame me again. Otherwise, don't blame me for being rude." Hearing her anxious and helpless voice, Xiao Su slightly curled his lips. Then he looked over the army and released his pressure. His eyes were like torches. When everyone felt this pressure, they couldn't help but slowly fall silent. Soldiers, this king knows that you have followed this king with great ambitions, so this king will remember this kindness. This king did not want to be enemies with the royal family, but the emperor went too far, killing loyal people and fabricating crimes to put this king to death. This king has endured humiliation for many years, only wanting to protect the country and its people, but the emperor ignored the ambitions of the surrounding countries and used all means to have this king die in the capital. This hatred is hard to dispel. Now there are wolves and tigers everywhere, but we're all bound together for good or ill. This king will share blessings and hardships with you." Xiao Su rarely said these words, but made the eyes of the soldiers turn red. Many of the generals by Xiao Su's side had followed him to many victories, but because of the emperor's suspicion, in order to suppress them, he didn't give them an equivalent reward for their military exploits. They were sent far away to the border, not to mention being promoted to nobility. This made them angry, but they didn't dare to say anything. Moreover, they had all been promoted by the Lord, so they didn't care much about military exploits. However, in many battles, the Sichuan emperor had embezzled the army's provisions. If the Lord hadn't thought of ways to fill their stomachs, they wouldn't have sacrificed their lives for the country and would have starved to death. They fought for the country and its people, but the Sichuan emperor's actions made them bitterly disappointed. At this moment, the crowd was angry. Xiao Su raised his hand to calm the restless crowd. Then, he took a step forward with the little fellow and said to the crowd in a clear voice, "For so many years, this king has been wandering between life and death. If the princess hadn't been by my side to look after me, this king might have already left this world and wouldn't have had the chance to pacify the chaos of the southern blue continent." Thus, this king said to himself, "In the first half of my life, I didn't let down the world, I didn't let down the country, and I definitely can't let her down in the future." Chu Qingyan didn't know what he wanted to say, so she quietly listened. However, she had a feeling that something was about to happen. The people below the stage also listened seriously, their gazes landing on a red-clothed youth with black hair. Their expressions were filled with gratitude and admiration. From the help you've given in the past, you can see that the princess is pure and kind, and she values friendship and righteousness. In today's competition, you've all seen the princess's ability. She's brave, intelligent, and capable of taking on great responsibilities. She doesn't lose to a man, so this king announces, from today onwards, she is the army's other Xiao Su. Seeing her is like seeing me. Her orders are this king's orders. No matter when or where, no one is to question them. His words were powerful and didn't allow for any objections. He wanted everyone to know just how important Chu Qingyan was in his life. He wouldn't allow something like this to happen again. He wouldn't allow anyone to hurt her in any way. So today, he wanted to show her his might. Seeing her is like seeing me. Chu Qingyan was deeply shocked by his words. Her mind kept replaying those words. She never thought that at this time, he would suddenly stand up for her. From now on, no one in the army would dare to bully her. At the same time, she would be given the same amount of power, and she would be able to walk freely. She felt the hand holding her slowly tighten. The heat that came from it made her feel at ease. This affection was too heavy. She estimated that she would have to bear it for the rest of her life. When the soldiers heard Xiao Su's words, they all knelt down and shouted in unison, "We pledge our lives to follow the general. We pledge our lives to follow the princess. We pledge our lives to follow the general. We pledge our lives to follow the princess." Their voices were like waves, each one louder than the last. From now on, Chu Qingyan's name would be on par with the god of war Xiao Su's. From now on, this pair of lovers would open a new chapter in their Sichuan. When the Chu clan's cheerleaders heard Xiao Su's order to tie Chu Qingyan up, they were all enraged. Just as they were about to make a move to save their mistress, they were calmed down by the earth spirit, who was already prepared. Seeing that the situation had changed, Chu Qingyan's father was overjoyed. He called everyone to the center of the field and began a new round of dancing. General Yo-Yo, Princess Yo-Yo. When the soldiers saw this, they also joined in happily. They waved their arms and swayed like the Chu family's cheerleaders. General Yo-Yo, Princess Yo-Yo. So when Chu Qingyan, who was originally very touched, saw the dancing spread to the entire training field, the corner of her mouth twitched. She couldn't help but raise her hand to cover her face. It was really painful to the eyes. However, Father Chu felt that this scale was too eye-catching. He immediately improvised a few more cheering dances. It became even more lively. Chapter 1407. The soldiers below the platform cheered. On the platform, the two of them looked at each other, looking down from above. Chu Qingyin looked down at the people below. She felt as though her chest was filled with a warm feeling that was slowly fermenting. She felt as though the entire world was beneath her feet. Walking on the road, she seemed to be walking on cotton and was about to float. Xiao Su, who was walking beside her, saw that her brows were full of smiles. His brows unconsciously relaxed, and a faint smile hung on the corner of his mouth. The two of them were like a pair bathed in the spring breeze. Even if they were walking on the simple path of the tents, they seemed to be walking on a beautiful and prosperous road. That kind of carefree, elegant, calm, and picturesque scene made people unable to look away. After today's events, the soldiers coming and going saw Chu Qingyin with admiration and respect in their eyes. They no longer treated her as an ordinary girl, because ordinary girls did not have her skilled archery skills, terrifying explosive power, and valiant fighting ability. Moreover, Yahweh, who was standing beside her, restrained his aura and was no longer as cold and unapproachable as usual. This was a girl who was so valiant that it made people fearful and admirable. Big Ice Cube, I didn't think that was your goal. While walking, she was in an exceptionally good mood. Not only because she had won the competition and won the respect of the soldiers, but also because of everything he had done for her on the platform. Xiao Su's lips curled up. What else did you think it was? As they spoke, the two of them walked up a small slope. From this angle, they could see all the tents. In the distance, the setting sun had yet to set. It hung on the mountaintop, and the afterglow was like silk twining in the mountain wind. It was dazzling. It was already close to evening. Iron pots had been set up in the open space, and people were starting to cook. Not long after, smoke rose in spirals into the air. The soldiers patrolled back and forth in orderly steps. Their voices were covered by the sound of cooking. Not far away, groups of war horses were eating horse grass. The smell of smoke was strong. If it was another time in Roll, it would be like a group of nomads on the grassland, leisurely and contented. Chu Qingyin retracted her gaze and turned to look at him. At that time, I didn't have any thoughts because I knew you had your own reasons for doing things. I only needed to believe in you and follow you. Xiao Su's gaze softened because of her words. He reached out his hand and gently rubbed her head. You cooperated very well. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, it was difficult for Xiao Su to give her any hints. But when he spoke, she did not say a word, and she went along with him. This made him very proud. His little fellow trusted him very much. When I held the knife to your neck, were you afraid? Chu Qingyin pretended to roll her eyes at him. It's all in the past. Isn't it too late for you to ask me if I was afraid now? Xiao Su chuckled. Don't worry. Why would I hurt you? As he spoke, he reached out and gently pulled her into his embrace. He rested his chin on the top of her head, and his fingers tenderly stroked her ink-black hair. Throwing herself into this warm embrace, Chu Qingyin subconsciously grabbed the front of his clothes and pressed her face against his chest, listening to his strong and powerful heartbeat. Of course, she knew that in this world, other than her parents, anyone could hurt her. Only he would not. This person, valued her life more than his own. It was also because of this reason that even when his sword was close to her neck, she still believed that he loved her. Why did you do this? She was asking about the matter of him establishing her authority. Xiao Su hugged her waist and leaned against her with a relaxed expression. When he heard this, he did not open his eyes and slowly replied, Didn't you say that you wanted to fight alongside me? So, you naturally have to stand by my side. Because my glory is your glory. Everything I have is everything you have. You deserve everything I have. In the future, I will walk with you on every path. Big Ice Cube is so good to me, she mumbled with a soft voice. It was different from her usual clear voice. It sounded coquettish and coquettish. This voice made Xiao Su's entire body tense up. His hands could not help but tighten as he pulled her into his embrace and buried his head in her shoulder. Then what about you? Although she seemed to have won easily today, she had expended a lot of energy. Smelling the pleasant smell of ink on his body, she was a little sleepy. When she heard his words in her daze, she did not immediately understand. What? I'm good to you. So politeness demands reciprocity. How do you want to repay me? He patiently explained. If it was in the past, she would not have thought too much about it. But ever since the two of them had incomparably intimate contact, she was very sensitive to these words. She had a bad premonition in her heart that made her scalp tighten. I don't understand. It seems like the food is ready. Let's go eat. At this moment, she chose to play dead. When she finished speaking, she heard a low chuckle by her ear. Before she could recover from his laughter, she heard him speak in a serious tone. I'm indeed a little hungry. She thought that he had let her go, but unexpectedly, his next words made her cheeks turn red. I can't help but want to start eating. Following that, her feet were in the air. She cried out softly and lost her balance. She hurriedly hugged his neck, but he laughed even more heartily. He moved closer to her ear and whispered bewitchingly, "Accompany me tonight." Every time he used his handsome male trick, she could not resist. She could not help but bury herself in his embrace and muffled a mosquito-like reply. Okay. Xiao Su's lips hooked up. Without another word, he directly carried her into the small forest from before. When she revisited the old place, Chu Qingyan had a kind of self-awareness that the evils she brought upon herself were the hardest to bear. However, this was the man she had chosen. How could she bear to see him suffer? The moon hung above the treetops. The night was hazy and the mountain breeze was gentle. It was a beautiful place to talk about love. Although the two masters did not see each other from afternoon to night, the smart ones knew that they should not disturb them. Each of them concentrated on their own matters. 100 li away, there was a group of light cavalry galloping on the road. How much longer until we arrive? The leader of the group was dressed in black armor and asked the person beside him. Fourth Highness, we will arrive in another day. Yanshi looked into the distance, then retracted his gaze and replied, Very good. Inform everyone that we will rest during the day and continue our journey tomorrow night. Xiao Ran ordered without hesitation. Yanshi complied, and then turned around to pass on the order to the person behind him. The moon hung in the sky like a hook, illuminating every inch of land. Xiao Ran pursed his lips, and his expression was cold. He had brought half of the army to rush through the night and avoided the official roads. He had specifically chosen the roads that were not detailed on the map. This was to prevent others from discovering him. Only by doing things in the dark could he be undetectable. This method had been taught to him by Qingyan. He never thought that there would be a day when he would use it on them. Xiao Ran clamped the horse's belly and held the reins in his hand as he rushed through the mountain path like lightning. Chapter 1408. Inside the tent, the high-ranking officers gathered and sat in rows in an orderly manner, filling the large tent to the brim. At this time, Chu Qingyan was also sitting to the side. Today was her official meeting with everyone. She tried to sit up straight, but after last night, her entire body was sore and weak. She wanted to find a place to lie down and become a softie. Beside her, a certain person who had eaten his fill had a silver mask on his face, but his smiling eyes showed his mood. Even the cold aura that kept people at 1,000 miles away had lessened. The generals who did not know the situation thought that with Wang Fei present, Wang Yi was more human. He was not as cold and hard to get close to as before. It seemed that Wang Fei was right to stay. They wanted to worship her. Chu Qingyan felt everyone's gaze and glanced at him even more exasperatedly. If he had not said that he would not touch her in the future, she would not have allowed him to mess around last night. She knew what he meant. As the commander-in-chief, he carried the lives and trust of tens of thousands of soldiers on his shoulders. How could he indulge in love? But it was because she was soft-hearted that she fell into his trap. Now, even walking was difficult for her. At this time, it was time for a serious discussion. Where is Xiao Ran's army now? Xiao Su asked faintly. Jing Guanghui stood up. He was in charge of intelligence gathering. They started moving in our direction 3 days ago. They will arrive in 4 or 5 days. When Chu Qingyan heard this, she couldn't help but frown. She had heard the news that Xiao Ran was leading an army to chase after the big ice block. Why were they still so far away? Immediately after, Jing Guanghui said, but the messenger mentioned something. He said that it was very strange. The army was not in a hurry at all. It did not seem like they were rushing to war. These words caused everyone present to be puzzled. Someone said, "Could it be that His Highness Fourth Prince and our Lord have deep brotherly ties, so he wants to let him go and does not want to make things difficult for him?" Xiao Su and Chu Qingyan looked at each other and saw the coldness in each other's eyes. How could it be? When he sent people to surround the prison that day, their brotherly ties were broken and could not be mended. Xiao Su tapped on the table and said coldly, "Prepare for war from today onwards." "What does the Lord mean?" Hong Jianhua asked. Xiao Su pursed his lips. "Xiao Ran has used a camouflage technique. He should have brought his men and approached us quickly. What the scout saw was that he left behind a small force to disguise as an army of 200,000. His goal is to delay us and lower the army's guard. When the time comes, he will be able to catch us off guard and catch us off guard." Everyone was in an uproar. They completely believed in Lord's judgment. At this moment, they were astonished that the quiet and gentle fourth prince actually had such a trick up his sleeves. The Lord is wise. What should we do now? Wu Lin cupped his hands and asked casually, "According to my calculations, we will officially meet tomorrow at the earliest." Xiao Su was silent for a while, and then his voice became solemn. "Gao Hao, listen to my orders. Jing Guanghui, listen to my orders. Wu Lin, heed my orders." The orders were passed down. The generals who received the orders left the tent one after another. Soon, the tent was much emptier. Chu Qingyan, who was waiting for orders wholeheartedly, did not hear her name until the end. After everyone left, she placed her hands on the table in front of him and asked fiercely, "What about me?" Xiao Su had already expected that she would not be able to sit still. He reached out and patted the back of her hand, comforting her. "Don't worry. I have already transferred Fong Lu to your command. It's just that he has not returned yet. When he comes back, I will let you familiarize yourself with the troops." A certain someone who had been successfully pacified snorted a few times, and then said, "Why did you think of transferring Fong Lu to me?" Xiao Su smiled lightly. "The people under him are responsible for more things, whether it's scouting, receiving, or fighting. Having multiple roles suits your style. Moreover, you have worked with him before. The two of you can skip the step of familiarizing yourself with each other. It will be easier for you to get used to each other." Chu Qingyan's eyes lit up when she heard this. When they were recruiting, she suggested that he could choose people with special abilities from everyone and cultivate an elite troop that could be used at any time. She did not expect that not only did the big ice block listen to her, he actually cultivated them. "Are you really giving them all to me?" She could not help but confirm again. Xiao Su raised his hand and rubbed her face in amusement. "Who else should I give them to if not you? You're the one who suggested it. Of course, you're responsible for closing the stall. Moreover, I have the fierce cavalry. I don't have extra energy to manage them. Although you have the fierce cavalry, there are only a few dozen of them. The fierce cavalry has 1,500 people. The number of people is not comparable to the other generals, but each of them has skills that are enough for you to use. Moreover, Fong Lu's ability is not enough to control them. I need you to help me train them and display their true abilities." His little fellow was smart and quick-witted. She knew how to use people. Her mind was full of strange ideas. She did not walk the path of ordinary people. He believed that in the near future, she would definitely bring him a pleasant surprise. He was looking forward to it. "I know you treat me the best. Then I will wait for Fong Lu to come back and meet these people." She laughed mischievously. Her fingers touched her chin, smiling like a fox. Xiao Su naturally knew what she was thinking. He could not help but curve his lips. Only this kind of person could subdue that group of arrogant fellows. Someone came in to report something. Chu Qingyan left first, not wanting to disturb him. The main reason was that she urgently needed to catch up on sleep. 2 dark circles hung around her eyes, making her look like a panda. Just as she walked out, she met her father, who was looking at her anxiously. "Kai Kai, where did Snowflake Cake and the others go to play?" Father has not seen them for 2 days. Black Impermanence and the others did not play with Father. Father is so bored. Father Chu blinked, his face innocent and sincere as he asked her. Originally, there was still Su Yi and the others to play with him. However, ever since the Chu family's cheerleading team was formed, everyone who saw him ran away like a wisp of smoke. They were afraid that they would be caught to sing, dance, and shout slogans. That was more painful than punishment. She smiled mysteriously. They went to do something. When they come back, I will let them accompany you properly. Father Chu's eyes immediately lit up. What is it? A secret? She laughed mischievously. Seeing this, Father Chu did not ask anymore. He sighed and said, Kai Kai, father is alone and has no one to accompany him. If you had given birth to a grandson earlier to play with father, it would have been so much easier. But you're all fighting a war. Father will have to wait for God knows how long. Chu Qingyan was stunned. She could not help but recall that the two of them had been in high spirits for the past 2 days. They did not use any contraception, so it should not be so easy for them to fall for it, right? She comforted herself, then comforted her father. You won't be lonely. Daughter will. She wanted to call someone to play with her father, but when she turned around, Jean Xian, Su Yi, and the others immediately retreated. Then they looked at the sky and the ground and did not look at her. She turned around, only to see her father stomping his feet. A bunch of bad people. None of them are playing with me. I'm going to complain to Dan Yang. Then he turned around and ran away. When she turned around again, Jean Xian and the others were already standing behind her again. Chu Qingyan could not help but twitch the corner of her mouth. Chapter 1409. Xiao came very quickly. Not long after Xiao Su's deployment was issued, he led his men to carry out the first wave of attack. In the dead of night, they killed people without leaving a trace. Fortunately, Xiao Su was prepared. Otherwise, this unexpected attack would have likely gone according to Xiao Ran's wishes. The usually quiet mountain forest was now filled with the sound of swords clashing, as if the world was about to be overturned. Swords flashed, flames soared into the sky, and figures with red eyes could be seen everywhere. Although the other party came silently, they had the advantage of being fully prepared before, so they were not caught off guard. Xiao Ran sat on the back of a horse and looked at the two armies that had sunk into a state of anxiety from a small hill. His face was red from the reflection of the flames, and his eyes were shining brightly. It was as if he wanted to see through the layers of people and find the two familiar figures. It was just that there were too many people, and he could not find them, but he was not in a hurry. His army of 100,000 was against Xiao Su's army of 100,000. Perhaps they weren't as strong as Xiao Su, but they were evenly matched. In this dark night, his sneak attack had taken advantage of the timing. At the very least, he could cause them to panic for a moment, and that was exactly what he needed. Your Highness, our people have surrounded them in the southeast and north. Yanshi rode up the hill on his war horse and reported. Very good. The plan is going well. Xiao Ran nodded, and there was a faint smile on his face. Yanshi smiled, but when he recalled the scene half an hour ago, he could not help but shiver in his heart. Although they were a little caught off guard at the moment of the fight, they soon reacted and entered the combat state. The people trained by the King of England are really strong. Our two small teams were almost completely wiped out, but no matter how strong they are, they have been confused by us and are now falling into our trap. If they are not strong, eldest brother is not worthy of the title of Sichuan God of War. Xiao Ran pulled his lips and looked back at the battlefield below. A gust of mountain wind blew, and his eyes were a little cold. Yanshi nodded repeatedly. Your Highness is right. Otherwise, we wouldn't have spent so much effort to set this up. Xiao Ran did not respond to his words. It was as if his whole mind was on the battlefield. He stood beside him obediently and did not speak anymore. He watched the battle below intently. Although he did not show it on the surface, he was still shocked by the ferocity and valiance of the King of England's men. Although His Highness the Fourth Prince had said that there was no need to worry about them gaining the upper hand, and that as long as he could delay them and make them lower their guard, the final counterattack would be the key. But when he saw the battle, he was still deeply shocked. If he didn't know that His Highness the Fourth Prince still had some tricks up his sleeve, he probably wouldn't have the mental strength to deal with the situation in front of him. 100,000 against 100,000, It seemed like two weights that could be balanced on a scale. However, when one side was stronger than the other, the scale would tilt. For example, right now, the attacking enemy troops were approaching in waves. The fighting in the east, south, and north was endless. If they were not all blocked by Xiao Su's iron walls, they would be beaten to a pulp. Being attacked by others was a very annoying thing. But because they had already hinted that they had made the corresponding notification, the generals were not in a hurry to deal with it. There were several senior generals sitting in the military tent, such as Gao Hao, Hong, Jianhua, Jingguanghui, and so on. Lord, we have already defeated several waves of enemy troops, and they have suffered heavy losses. Before they came, I thought that they had a large number of people and we would not be able to win. Now it seems that they have overestimated themselves. At the end of the report, Jingguanghui showed some disdain. With this level of strength, they dared to touch the whiskers of Tiger. They simply did not want to live. The other generals also reported the situation of the several armies under their command. Basically, their side had won, and their faces were full of joy. Since the beginning of the attack, Chu Qingyan had been summoned to the main tent. At this time, she was seriously listening to the reports from all sides. 2 hours ago, the enemy troops had suddenly appeared around the tent, and they had actually managed to hide from their scouts. They came with a fierce momentum, as if they wanted to fight to the death with them. This was the first time they had fought Xiao Ran head-on, but it surprised her because the other party's fighting methods were more mature than before and also more frightening. 100,000 soldiers had silently concealed themselves from the spies they had set up, crossed the mountains and deep waters, and arrived at their side. Furthermore, they had chosen the most relaxed time to launch a full-scale attack at the first moment when they had yet to notice. They were bold and meticulous, and it was difficult to overlap with the gentle figure from back then. Her absent-mindedness was called back by a deep voice. "Are you sure they have 100,000 soldiers?" Xiao Su frowned slightly. Hong Jianhua immediately nodded. "That's most likely the number." Hearing this, Xiao Su's frown deepened. Chu Qingyan saw that his expression was not quite right, and couldn't help but ask, "Is there a problem?" He meditated for a while, then slowly said, "Although he brought 100,000 soldiers to fight against our 100,000, and the numbers are about the same, he should know that the people under my command are all carefully selected, and the difference in strength is huge. But he still dares to fight force without hesitation. I keep feeling that something is wrong." Jing Guanghui stood up, a smile on his face. "Lord, you might not know, but this fourth prince doesn't know how to fight at all. Back when we fought against Nansong, we suffered a lot because of his careless command. Originally, we shouldn't have lost so badly, but in the end, we gave the cities to Nansong for nothing. So this general feels that this time, it is very likely that he is blindly commanding. We don't need to be so nervous." As soon as Jing Guanghui finished speaking, Hong Jianhua shook his head and said, "It is better to be safe than sorry. We can't underestimate the enemy." Chu Qingyan agreed with this and couldn't help but nod. She always felt that Xiao Ran had changed, and with so many people by his side, Shi Xian and Consort Yu's side, he wouldn't treat the life and death of 100,000 soldiers as child's play. However, no conclusion could be reached from the discussion, and for the time being, they would block soldiers with arms and water with an earth weir. After a night of fighting, the sky was about to brighten. Xiao Su let everyone go back to take turns to rest. "Big Ice Cube, what do you think Xiao Ran is thinking? He recklessly sent troops to attack for an entire night, as if to vent his anger. Does he really think that he can destroy us like this? He is too naive." When only the two of them were left, Chu Qingyan spilled her guts. Hearing this, Xiao Su smiled faintly and patted her head. "I think he will make another move. Perhaps he will show himself after daybreak. Don't worry, let's wait and see." She thought about it and couldn't help but nod, but she still felt a little uneasy. "But to be honest, I keep feeling that we are very passive this time." Chapter 14:10. Xiao Su smiled and patted her head before taking his hand back. "Whether we take the initiative or not, the most frightening thing is that the other party doesn't make a move." "That's true. She nodded but fell in a deep thought. Seeing that she was still unsettled, he was silent for a while and found a topic to divert her attention. Don't you think what he did today was a bit familiar? Chu Qingyan blinked. After Big Ice Cube's reminder, it did seem familiar. As she thought about it, she suddenly had a flash of inspiration. She could not help but blurt out, "Isn't this the move I used against Pang Huang?" Then she frowned. But it's a bit different. Back then, I went in a battle with light armor, but he had 100,000 soldiers. It was more difficult for him than for me. Xiao Su smiled coldly. He was able to avoid our eyes and ears and successfully bring such a huge army to us without being discovered because he was familiar with the way my spies investigate. That's why he was able to do this. Before Big Ice Cube finished speaking, she had already guessed it. She could not help but tug at his sleeve. So you taught him how to use spies before? Her words made the pair of black eyes darken. Because he did not have the intention to seize the throne, he only wanted to protect the country and the people wholeheartedly. And this fourth brother was also a candidate in his heart for the crown prince. In addition, his fourth brother was kind and gentle, so he slowly taught him the experience he had gained over the years bit by bit. He thought that if one day he was no longer an official in the court, he could be completely at ease and hand over the three armies and the world to him. But he did not expect that the plan could not keep up with the changes. And what he had done back then was used by his fourth brother as a sharp blade to deal with him. Now that he thought about it, it was too laughable. Sort of. Sensing the change in Big Ice Cube's mood, Chu Qingyan's feelings for Xiao Ran faded a bit. Biting the hand that fed him was probably talking about him. Not only did he use yours, he also learned mine. He fought against us without holding back. So this disciple wants to kill our two masters. Although she was angry, she couldn't do anything about it. She wanted to comfort the Ice Cube more, so she couldn't help but tease herself. Xiao Su knew what she was thinking. His brows relaxed, and he smiled at her. As the saying goes, the devil rises 10. Whether or not he can gain anything will depend on the final result. Although I don't know what he's thinking for now, we can still see to what extent this disciple has learned. Perhaps the result will make you proud. Seeing that he was still in the mood to joke around, Chu Qingyan couldn't help but laugh along with him. That's right. We'll know if it's a mule or a horse. It was daybreak. Without the cover of darkness, the battlefield could be seen clearly. The two armies were still locked in a stalemate. Fourth Highness, as you expected, they didn't discover our goal because we did our best to hold them back. Fourth Highness really has a divine plan. Yanshi received the report from below and immediately passed it to Xiao Ran. In the end, he couldn't help but sigh. Xiao Ran pursed his lips. My imperial brother is a meticulous person. If I didn't fight so recklessly, I'm afraid it's impossible for him to not realize it by now. Perhaps it's because I've never won a battle in the past, so it's easier for them to believe me. Right now, I'm just doing whatever I want without thinking. Fourth Highness is smart and farsighted. You can even see through the opponent's thoughts. This general admires you very much. Yanshi hurriedly praised. Xiao Ran waved his hand. Let's talk about this after we win. Where's the second group now? When it came to business, Yanshi's expression became more serious. They'll arrive today. Good. When everyone arrives, we'll act according to the plan. Xiao Ran stood on the hillside. His body was stained with dew for an entire night, but he didn't feel cold. On the contrary, his blood seemed to be boiling, as if a fire had ignited in his heart. He had always looked forward to being able to have a fair fight with his royal brother, but he didn't expect it to be on such an occasion. However, his obsession with Qingyan filled him with fighting spirit. This time, he wanted to prove to her that there was more than one outstanding man like his royal brother in this world. If she couldn't see him, then he would personally defeat his royal brother, the invincible god of war. He believed that this way, she would definitely look at him in a new light. With this thought, Xiao Ran couldn't help but want to see what kind of expression those people would have when his plan matured. Just as the two sides were fighting in full swing, an army of unknown origin suddenly joined Xiao Ran's army. There were at least 50 to 60,000 of them. All of a sudden, there was a huge disparity in manpower. Xiao Su's side was repeatedly defeated. When Xiao Su received the news, many generals had already rushed into the main tent, bringing with them a lot of bad news. The soldiers had been fighting for an entire night, so they were mentally and physically exhausted. They originally thought that the two of them would have a short truce, but they never expected that reinforcements would arrive. Their stamina was above theirs, so they couldn't hold on any longer. Xiao Su's fingers clasped on the table. His expression was somewhat heavy. So this is his backup plan. He had led the first batch of troops to launch a sneak attack, attracting all their attention. Then, when they were exhausted, the second batch of troops would arrive. How could the exhausted army compare to their energetic reinforcements? This plan was indeed well thought out. However, it wasn't just that. This was because using numbers to delay was the stupidest tactic. The enemy came too suddenly. Our people had just reacted when their defenses were breached. There was already a huge disparity in stamina between the two sides, so they were already at a disadvantage. With the addition of numbers, if they were to clash head-on, they had no chance of winning. This prince understands. Xiao Su's calm and collected appearance was like a cool breeze blowing away the restlessness in the tent. The anxious generals couldn't help but feel ashamed when they saw this. They had followed the Lord through all kinds of storms, so how could they lose their composure when they encountered a small problem? Chu Qingyan was originally worried about these generals, but when she saw that they were quickly adjusting themselves, she couldn't help but sigh in relief. Turning her head, she saw a tall and handsome figure drawing circles on the map. When he stopped, she heard him speak coldly, his voice filled with understanding. So it's like this. Did you find anything? She moved closer. When he looked at the map, the other generals also looked over. They have placed layers of troops in the north, south, east, and west. Their goal is to drive us to the west. When Xiao Su's words fell, Chu Qingyan looked to the west. There were 2 or 3 connected mountains. She couldn't help but be puzzled. Isn't he afraid that we won't be able to find us after we enter the mountains? He should have already made his arrangements. Xiao Su threw down his brush and smiled coldly. Order people to withdraw into the mountains. Everyone did not hesitate and left to carry out the order. Chapter 14:11. After fighting for a day and a night, Xiao Su's army began to retreat to the west. When they retreated to the foot of the mountain, Xiao ran and the others also stopped attacking. The two sides were like hibernating leopards, eyeing each other covetously. Why didn't they pursue the matter after winning? Jing Guanghui looked into the distance and asked the person beside him in confusion. Hong Jianhua's face was serious. They waded through mountains and rivers to enter the battle. Everyone will be tired. Not only do we need to rest, they also need to rest. Don't lose your judgment just because they have the upper hand for a while. Jing Guanghui was embarrassed when he heard this. Then he said, "Didn't Lord say that their goal should be to drive us into mountains? Why did they surround us at the foot of the mountain and not move?" Hong Jianhua shook his head, his voice more serious than before. "I don't know either. Lord said that the other side may be waiting for an opportunity, but I don't know what he is referring to." Jing Guanghui fell silent. The people beside him looked at the setting sun. Their expressions were like the thick clouds that could not be dispersed, heavy and heavy. At the foot of the mountain, all was quiet. Only the sound of soldiers walking and patrolling could be heard. But everyone knew that this was the calm before the storm. Everyone was more careful and did not dare to relax. In the main tent, Xiao Su and Chu Qingyan sat opposite each other. "Fourth brother already knows that you have been driven out of the camp?" Xiao Su poured a cup of tea for her and pushed it in front of her. His eyes were gentle, as if the tense atmosphere outside did not affect him at all. Chu Qingyan chuckled and said, "That's right. 2 days ago, I asked that spy to send him a message. I think that the only reason he dared to come here so brazenly is because he is certain that without me, Little Hai and the others would not listen to you." Last time, after she had subdued the army, she thought back and realized what Xiao Ran's plan was. Wasn't it to separate her from Big Ice Cube and not let her help? Without the eagles and wolves, even if Big Ice Cube subordinates were elite soldiers, They could not compete with their numbers. After saying that, she supported her chin with one hand and smiled innocently and helplessly. This disciple seems to have learned better than I thought. Xiao Su smiled and sipped his tea. He raised his eyebrows and looked at her. Why don't you ask me how I found out? Chu Qingyin snorted and said matter-of-factly, Lu Bai was taken away by me and never came back. How could you not know? Could it be that your people are all useless? Besides, I didn't intend to hide it from you, so it's normal for you to know. Xiao Su chuckled. He liked it when she trusted him wholeheartedly. It was just like that day on the high platform. This feeling made all the pores on his body relax. After she finished speaking, she saw him leisurely sipping his tea with a smile on his lips. She couldn't take her eyes off him. The stranger was like jade, and the young master was unparalleled. From the first time she saw him, she knew that such a person was destined to be extraordinary, so she wanted to stay away from him. After all, the celestial items in the heavens were not something mortals like her could touch. However, fate tied the two of them together, and they couldn't be separated. For the sake of her parents, she didn't dare to fight against the nobles and could only play her role obediently. However, God was kind to her. After letting her rediscover her family, God sent such a jade-like young master to her. From his cold-blooded appearance to his softest side, she had fallen deeply in his gentleness and didn't want to be separated from him anymore. The two of them held hands and went through ups and downs. Looking back, the things that they had experienced together could be written into a book. However, the latter half of their lives was still so long, and she still wanted to go on with him. Her gaze regained its focus and fell on him. He had the iron blood of a soldier, which had settled down after many years of fighting and killing enemies. At the same time, he also had the leisure of a hermit, such as at this moment. Although he was wearing a silver battle suit, when he held the teacup in his hand and tilted his head slightly, his gaze was calm and indifferent. She felt as if the two of them were in a high mountain with green leaves and red flowers beside them and birds chirping in the distance. Her mind couldn't help but think of a poem, picking chrysanthemums under the eastern fence, leisurely seeing the southern mountain. Suddenly, a pair of hands appeared in front of her eyes. She came back to her senses and looked up to meet those teasing eyes. Her cheeks couldn't help but heat up. She actually stared at him in front of the big ice cube like this. How could she be so unreserved? Although the two of them had already seen each other openly, she still felt incomparably shy. Xiao Su withdrew his hand, and his gaze fell on her reddened ears. His lips curled into a devilish smile. We're already an old married couple. Why are you so easily shy? She pursed her lips and raised her voice to hide her embarrassment. Who said I'm shy? Which eye of yours saw it? Humph. Xiao Su gave a low laugh when he heard this. Only he could see such a childish side of her. He didn't say anything and instead laughed. This made her want to dig a hole to hide in. The heat rising from her face could be used as steam buns. Hey, you can't bully people like this. She pouted and reached out to tug at his sleeve, complaining about his actions. Her eyes were filled with innocence, grievance, and shyness. Xiao Su raised his head and put his hand on the back of her hand. He wrapped her little hand in his, and his fingers curled around her palm as he gently tickled it. His eyes were sparkling. Is this bullying you? What do you think? She glared at him. Just as she finished speaking, the person in front of her was already in front of her. His breath brushed past the hair by her ear, and his voice was ambiguous. I prefer to bully you in other places. His voice was too seductive, and her mind immediately thought of some discordant images. It was as if her entire body had been immobilized, and she was unable to move. Her entire body felt like it was on fire, and she could imagine that her face must be even redder than a cooked prawn. Xiao Su knew when to stop. Otherwise, if he couldn't stop in the end, the one who was teased would be himself. He straightened up and met the little fellow's accusing eyes. His eyes were filled with layers of laughter. All right, I'm just teasing you. Right now, even if I have that kind of heart, the situation won't allow it. After he left, she felt the frozen air suddenly relax. Hearing this, she unhappily rolled her eyes at him several times. But the more she glared at him, the happier he became. It really was too infuriating. As expected, after eating, he revealed his true nature. Her mind turned, and she suddenly thought of something. Her eyes lit up. Xiao Su noticed the change in her. Just as he was about to ponder, the person was already in front of him. The beauty was like a flower, throwing herself into his arms. Moreover, it was the person he loved. How could he control himself, especially when she took the initiative to tease him? When he reached out to pull her into his embrace, Chu Qingyan immediately moved to the side of the curtain. She winked at a certain person whose face was filled with lust. "Who told you to bully me? Bye-bye." Xiao Su fiercely gulped down a large amount of herbal tea before the restlessness within his body was extinguished. He couldn't help but rub his forehead in both anger and amusement as he looked at the trembling curtain. What a little demoness. At this time, Hong Jianhua rushed into the tent with his men. "General, something bad has happened." Chapter 14:12. As soon as Hong Jianhua came in, he saw the displeased look in his master's eyes. The restlessness in his body instantly disappeared. He unconsciously shook his body. After being in a daze for a while, he came back to his senses. Before, he had scolded others. Now, he had made the same mistake. Lord, he lacked confidence as soon as he spoke. "General Hong, you're the most experienced veteran in the army. Why are you still so rash? The soldiers can't interact with this king, so your words and actions represent this king's wishes. What will the soldiers below think if they see you acting so rashly?" Xiao Su's cold voice bluntly spoke to Hong Jianhua, completely ignoring the embarrassed and ashamed expressions of the generals behind him. Hong Jianhua immediately restrained his expression, lifted his battle robe, and knelt down. He straightened his back and said with incomparable shame, "This general did not lead well. This general is guilty. Please punish me, general." Xiao Su glanced at him indifferently before raising his hand to let him stand up. "Remember, there will be no next time." Only then did Hong Jianhua stand up gratefully, his expression becoming more and more serious. "What happened?" Xiao Su finally cut to the chase. After receiving instructions, Hong Jianhua immediately reported the news he had received. The sun has just set, and Xiao Ran has launched another attack. Furthermore, it's very aggressive. It seems like he won't stop until he forces us into the mountains. Xiao Su raised his brows. "Didn't we already guess? Why are you still so flustered?" A general behind Hong Jianhua immediately replied, "That's not all. The mountain has been surrounded. If we really enter the mountain, we will be trapped and unable to move. Moreover, our provisions haven't arrived yet. We don't have enough provisions to last us 3 days. If we enter the mountain, we will run out of food. There's another important thing. An hour ago, we sent a small team to explore the mountain, but they were found dead in the cave. Their bodies were eaten by wild beasts. At the end of the sentence, the faces of several people became very ugly. Lord, there are wild beasts in the mountains. I'm afraid there are more than 1 or 2 of them. This Xiao Ran wants to trap us in the forest, not only to cut off our escape route, but also to let us fight with the wild beasts while he reaps the benefits." Xiao Su narrowed his eyes. Was that all? At this time, the people who received the news rushed to the tent. Chu Qingyan appeared in the tent as soon as she heard Jean Xian's report. "Then what should we do now?" Gao Hao asked the person in front of him. Xiao Su's expression was indifferent, and no one could tell what he was thinking. "You've rested enough. Bring your men into the mountains and restrain them well. Don't make any mistakes." "Yes." Although it was clear that there was a mountain of daggers and a sea of flames ahead, they firmly believed in the Lord's orders and obeyed. Everyone had their own troops and retreated to make arrangements. In the end, only Chu Qingyan was left because her troops were still escorting the supplies and had yet to return. "Big Ice Cube, I suspect that Xiao Ran has other motives." Chu Qingyan voiced her concerns. When she felt his encouraging gaze, she took a sip of tea and continued, "Although we're currently surrounded by them, we have a large number of people. It's impossible for them to trap 100,000 soldiers in the mountains. Even a rabbit will bite when cornered. Moreover, We're not rabbits. If they enrage us, the worst that can happen is that both sides will suffer losses. However, this won't benefit Xiao Ran at all. Because she didn't have an army at the moment, she wasn't as busy as the other generals. She didn't have time to look at the big picture, so she could see more clearly than the others. Husband and wife think alike. Xiao Su reached out and scratched her nose, then continued. After all, consort, you spent so much effort to nurture him. He's also a studious and intelligent person. He didn't show it in front of us in the past, but now that he's ruthless, he has Imperial Father's shadow. However, on the battlefield, it's all about strength. If he shows his true abilities, I'll see if he's qualified to be my opponent. One shouldn't covet one's brother's wife. This was an unforgivable mistake that Xiao Ran had made, and it was also an unforgivable mistake that Xiao Su couldn't forgive him for. Without regard for their feelings, more than 10 years of brotherly love had been destroyed. This time, he wouldn't be merciful. When Chu Qingyan heard this, she nodded in agreement. Big Ice Cube, don't worry. Even if he has a lot of tricks up his sleeve, there's no need to be afraid. We also have a backup plan. As she spoke, she winked mischievously at him. Xiao Su chuckled. You're the only one who's mischievous. Everything was as Xiao Ran expected. Xiao Su's army was pushed into the mountains. All the exits have been surrounded by our people. There's no need to worry about them escaping. When Yanshi received the news, he immediately reported it to Xiao Ran. At this time, Xiao Ran was sitting in the tent. When he heard this, he couldn't help but walk out. Yanshi followed closely behind. After standing at the top of the mountain, Xiao Ran looked into the distance. The originally dark forest was now as bright as day. He knew that was where his brother's army was. The corners of his lips curled up. They had already stepped into his plan step by step. Lu Bai had already sent word that Qing Yan had been chased out of the army, and her beast army was no longer of any use. Eldest brother was like a broken wing. With just these 100,000 soldiers, if he wanted to drag things out, he would be able to drag them to their deaths. Your Highness, when do we make our move? Yanshi stood behind him and asked. There's no hurry. They're now on the tightest guard and can achieve the best effect. Pass down the order to let the army rest for a while. There's still a hard battle to fight. Xiao Ran stroked his sleeve and replied calmly. Yanshi nodded and turned to give orders to the general behind him. When he turned back, he saw a red figure with his back facing him under the light of the fire. He suddenly felt a little dazed. He didn't know when, but from that gentle and untainted youth, he had grown into a general who made people tremble in fear. Experience can make a person change. He had heard a little about what happened in the palace. He and Xiao Su's entanglement with Chu Qingyan. He couldn't help but sigh. At this time, a sentence pulled him back to reality from his memories. 4 hours later, let's move. Yanshi composed himself. After confirming that he wasn't hallucinating, he immediately accepted the order. Hearing the footsteps behind him, Xiao Ran ordered the guard beside him. She was chased out not long ago. I believe she can't have gone far. Send a group of people to find her. No matter what, bring her back. Yes. After giving the order, Xiao Ran felt a lot more relaxed. He looked at the forest for a while and resolutely turned to leave. 4 hours later, on the top of the mountain, a row of archers was waiting. They pulled their bows, and the difference was that the arrowheads were poured with kerosene. At this time, they were aiming at Xiao Su's army deep in the mountains. Needless to say, there were many trees in the mountains. It could be imagined that so many arrows would be enough to destroy the forest. Release. Chapter 14:13. Whoosh! The rocket left the bowstring and drew a beautiful arc in the sky, just like a meteor shower, falling to the earth. As soon as they landed, they started a fire. Xiao Su's army did not move at this time. There were no screams, no sounds of fighting, only dead silence. Although they did not move, their expressions were not very good. The fire arrows fell from the sky and were blocked by the trees. They didn't hurt anyone, but they weren't aimed at people. Xiao Ran just wanted to turn this place into a sea of fire so that he could trap them. The trees were flammable, and the rockets were instantly ignited when they were inserted. All the generals surrounded Lord. Their faces were filled with anger toward Xiao Ran. Chu Qingyan glanced at everyone's reaction and could not help but sigh. This Xiao Ran really dared to do anything. Not to mention the lives of the 100,000 soldiers. Just look at the mountains. They rose and fell without end. If the fire was not controlled well and spread to the other mountains, then it would not just be 100,000 lives lost. The lives of the creatures in the mountains, as well as the villages near the mountains, would be incalculable. Chu Qingyan felt a chill in her heart. He was no longer the Xiao Ran of the past, the Xiao Ran who even brought back stray cats and dogs for her to help bandage. Now, things were still the same, but people were different. She only let herself reminisce for a while, but soon she pulled herself together and listened to everyone's discussion. Your Highness is right. They chased us into the mountains because they had a backup plan. They wanted us to be completely annihilated. This fire attack is really vicious. Yes, there are many ferocious beasts in the mountains. When the fire started, they all ran out. Just now, a soldier said that he had just killed 2 tigers and 3 leopards. It's too scary. Not only that, look at these rockets. They are all following the wind. When the fire started, it spread instantly. The fire is very fierce. Everyone was talking at once, but there was no anxiety or panic on their faces as Xiao Ran wanted to see. On the contrary, they were enthusiastic, as if they didn't care about the urgent matter in front of them. Chu Qingyan pursed her lips and looked at the person beside her. This disciple really wants to kill his master. Xiao Su sneered. Not exactly. He probably wants us to surrender, but his method is a bit ruthless. Xiao Ran was more cold-blooded than him. He actually thought of burning the mountain to force them. Even if he won in the end, it would cause a lot of suffering. I also did not expect him to use this move. Chu Qingyan sighed softly. With the wind blowing tonight, no matter the outcome of the battle between the 2 sides, the fire would definitely harm the innocent. Xiao Su looked into the distance, as if he wanted to see through the layers of flames. Unfortunately, he is wrong. Master's master. Chu Qingyan's lips curled in agreement. At this time, an eagle's cry came from the sky. She became alert and said in surprise, "Big ice cube. Little Hai and the others are back." Because the trees were spitting fire, Little Hai and the others could not fly down. They could only hover in the air. But it was different for beasts. Lord, Princess Consort, Snow Foxes are back. As soon as the soldier finished speaking, the crowd parted to form a path. Glutinous Rice Ball, Snowflake Cake, and White Jade Tang walked over with their heads held high and their chests puffed out, as if they were receiving a military parade. However, their elegance didn't last for more than 3 seconds. When they saw their master, how could they care about showing off their power? They happily pounced on her. Good. You've worked hard. Chu Qingyan couldn't help but rub their heads in amusement. After comforting them, she raised her head and said to Big Ice Cube, Bai Yutong said, "They're all waiting for your orders." As she said this, her gaze fell in a certain direction. Everyone followed her gaze and instantly widened their eyes. So the more timid ones directly sat on the ground in fright. My heavens, what the hell was this? Tigers, lions, leopards, foxes, wolves, each of them had cold gazes. They were either sitting or squatting. Normally, they would feel terrified just by seeing one. Now that they were standing in front of her in a group, she couldn't see the end of them. It was like a dream, more like a nightmare. However, these ferocious beasts seemed to understand humans and were very orderly. They followed their own leader and didn't run around. They just stayed there obediently. Although the formation wasn't so neat, they each had their own camp. More importantly, these were all untamed beasts. It was already a blessing to be able to control themselves and not attack humans. But to be able to listen to someone's orders, that was simply a miracle. If they did not see it with their own eyes, they would not dare to believe it. Very quickly, everyone's gaze turned to the person standing next to their lord and speaking with a faint smile. They only had one thought at this moment, and that was for her to kneel. Princess Consort, we want to swear allegiance. Princess Consort was not only strong, she also knew how to control beasts. Once this powerful group of beasts came out, who could fight against her. At this moment, everyone was incomparably glad that they pleaded on the high platform that day and did not let Princess Consort leave. Moreover, their admiration for her instantly rose to the level of worship and reverence. She was simply shoulder to shoulder with the sun. Chu Qingyan did not notice everyone's gazes. She was only concerned about the battle, and Xiao Su saw everyone's reaction and was in a good mood. His people deserved this kind of treatment. Send out the signal. Let the people in the dark prepare to move. In 15 minutes, we will coordinate from the inside and outside. Xiao Su gave the order. Xiao ran. You're not the only one with a backup plan. We also have one. Hualing, Snowflake Cake, and the others will follow you. Water Spirit, Glutinous Rice Ball, and the others will follow you. Hualing and Water Spirit each jumped onto the back of Tiger. The two of them looked at each other and smiled. I never thought that there would be a day where I would be able to lead so many beasts in a battle. Me too. After speaking, the two of them led the two groups of beasts and dashed in two opposite directions. General Wu, you lead some people and follow behind Hualing. General Jing, your people will follow Water Spirit. Xiao Su's order followed closely behind his little fellow. With the beasts clearing the way, their journey would be smooth and unobstructed. Yes, the generals immediately retreated and led their own troops in all directions. After the people around her left, Chu Qingyan tilted her head and reported to him. The beasts in the mountains have already been warned by Yutong and the others. They will not disturb our operation. The reason why Glutinous Rice Ball and the others were not around these days was because they went to gather people. When they came back, they conveniently taught the beasts in the mountains a lesson. They gathered those that could be used and made those that could not be used hide. Chu Qingyan could not help but feel that these three beasts had the illusion of dominating the mountains. She found it funny and also felt an inexplicable sense of pride. Well done. Xiao Su smiled faintly and nodded. Yutong raised its head and howled. Then, it rubbed against its master's palm to show that it was in a good mood. Xiao Su shook his head and laughed. Indeed, like master, like pet. After laughing, he returned to his cold and solemn self and said to the remaining people, It's about time for us to go. Okay. Chapter 14:14. Chu Qingyan leaped onto a spotted tiger, and Yutong led the way in front. The herd of beasts was like an arrow leaving the bow, rushing towards the exit with great momentum. Xiao Su led the troops and horses to separate from her, advancing side by side. In the dark night, the sea of fire was monstrous, and the two groups of people were like a long sword, cutting a path through the sea of fire, unstoppable. Cries and roars resounded through the entire mountain forest, as if the sky was about to be overturned. At the top of the hill, Xiao ran, who was resting with his eyes closed, suddenly opened his eyes when he heard the roars. His face was full of disbelief. At this time, a soldier stumbled over, shouting as he ran, Your Highness, there's a beast attack. It's so scary. So many wolves, so many tigers. Before the soldier could finish his words, the sound of troops clashing could be heard, accompanied by the roars of beasts that shook the sky. Xiao Ran's eyes were fixed on the beast that jumped out and bit everywhere. His eyes were red, and he was furious. How could this be? He muttered to himself. His plan was flawless, and he had calculated the right time, the right place, and the right people. How could there still be a change? At this time, a bright red figure appeared in his vision, dressed in bright clothes and riding a horse, with black hair and a long sword, a petite figure, but ruthless. He was so far away, but he could see every change of expression on her face clearly, as if he had practiced it countless times in his mind before. So that's how it is. He laughed lowly, and his laughter was incomparably sarcastic and unwilling. At this time, Yinshi had already received the news and ran over. His face was incomparably dignified. Things had happened so suddenly, and his voice could not help but be a little anxious. Your Highness, didn't you say that Chu Qingyan was not in the army? Where did these beasts come from? Why didn't we notice before? After asking all these questions, He realized that he had been rude and did not dare to raise his head to look at Xiao Ran. However, Xiao Ran did not take his rudeness to heart, and his eyes were cold. Lu Bai lied to us. Qing Yan was not expelled. How is that possible? Lu Bai is one of us. Why would he collude with the other party to deceive us? Yin Shi was in disbelief. Xiao Ran sneered. He can only blame himself for being too stupid to have his identity exposed. That's why eldest imperial brother used him to sow discord. We listened to his words and attacked with all our strength without any defense. This move is really clever. When Yin Shi heard this, he panicked even more. Then didn't the King of England already guess our plan? So when they were chased into the mountains, they were just playing along? Not necessarily. Although he used Lu Bai, he didn't know about my plan. So, our plan is still a success. It's just that there were some accidents. Xiao Ran looked at the ferocious beast below. A cold light flashed in his eyes. As for these beasts, they are not without weaknesses. Let the fire array deal with them. I don't believe that they are not afraid of fire. Hearing Xiao Ran's calm arrangement, Yin Shi was a little embarrassed that he had panicked over such a small matter. He calmed down immediately. I understand. I will give the order immediately. However, just as the two were talking, a black line, like ants, moved quickly from the other side of the plain, and the sound of fighting echoed in the forest. Xiao Ran's face changed, and he asked sternly, "What's going on?" Soon, someone came to report, "There are 50 to 60,000 of them, and the leader is a general under the King of England. Aren't his people here? How can there be reinforcements?" After that, Xiao Ran pulled out his long sword and slashed at the trunk. I know. All of this is really his plan. I was fooled by him. How can I be so stupid? Why can't he use a trick that I can? He could cross the sea and bring people to sneak attack, and his brother could also use the same trick to pretend that his 100,000 troops were there. He was too confident that he didn't order people to inquire before the plan was carried out. Yin Shi was afraid that he would take things too hard, and wanted to go forward to persuade him, but he saw him pull out his long sword, jump on the back of the horse, and pull the reins. I want to go to the battlefield personally. Your Highness, you can't do this. You are the commander-in-chief. You should be in the rear. Yin Shi was frightened and immediately advised, "My brother is not afraid to go to the battlefield personally. What should I be afraid of? Everything will be up to you to decide." Hiya. After Xiao Ran finished speaking, he immediately whipped his horse and galloped down the mountain. As soon as he went down the mountain, the soldiers immediately followed behind him in a grandiose manner. Yin Shi didn't have time to stop them. They had already run far away. He felt very uneasy, but the fourth prince was not someone he could persuade, so he could only accept his fate and carry out his orders. Beasts were the best targets to attack, because they were different from humans. They didn't have any fighting methods, and any attacks came from their instincts. They went up with a mouthful of sharp teeth and 4 sharp claws. This kind of attack was simple and crude, and it was difficult to defend against. Moreover, if you blocked one in front of you, maybe one would pounce on you from behind. Whether it was a wolf, tiger, or leopard, they were born with a sense of cooperation, and their cooperation was very tacit. These soldiers who were already afraid of them were not their opponents at all. Therefore, the encirclement was basically torn apart in seconds. Xiao Su and the others didn't even need to greet the soldiers who were surrounding them. With the beasts opening the way, they were simply unimpeded. The beasts were led by Chu Qingyan, so as soon as they left the mountain pass, she led her beast soldiers straight to the enemy's camp in order to disturb their formation. As long as the formation was in chaos, it would be easier for Big Ice and the others to clean up. Just as she retracted her sword and was about to continue forward, she heard a voice calling out to her. It pierced through the shouting and killing and came to her ears. She patted the piebald tiger under her, then turned around to look. Her gaze passed through the sea of people on the battlefield, and she saw a handsome figure sitting on a white warhorse. His black battle robe made him look tall and slender, but the expression on his face was no longer the one she was familiar with. Xiao Ran. After looking for a while, Chu Qingyan's cold face revealed a smile. "Long time no see, Xiao Ran." As the two of them looked at each other, The two sides slowly approached each other. He stopped his horse at a distance where he could hear her greeting. The first thing that surged into his heart was joy. She was still willing to talk to him, but when he met her eyes, his body suddenly stiffened. Those clear and beautiful eyes were covered with a thin layer of frost, cold and distant, without the intimacy of the past. This was what he didn't want and didn't dare to see the most. His heart instantly became restless, and he wanted to change the situation. Qingyan, I was wrong in the past, but I had no choice. You know my feelings for you. I want to give you happiness. I want you to be happy for the rest of your life and not have to worry about anything. Chu Qingyan looked at him coldly. Is that so? But why do I feel that all these worries and fears are because of you? Chapter 14:15. Chu Qingyan's ruthless words made Xiao Ran's face turn white. Qingyan, I'm really doing this for your own good. He couldn't refute. Chu Qingyan laughed softly. Is that so? But aren't you already engaged? Is this what you mean by doing this for my own good? If you can't treat people wholeheartedly, how can you make me believe that you're doing this for my own good? Hearing this, Xiao Ran became very agitated. Qingyan, don't misunderstand. I'm marrying the Jing family purely because I need someone to support me in court. That way, I can have a foothold in court, and it'll be easier for me to do things in the future. I don't have any feelings for Jing Mingzhu. If you're not happy, I won't pay attention to her in the future. Although she has the position of official consort and enjoys the glory, I still only have you in my heart. Imperial Consort Mother said that I can't take you as an official consort, but don't worry, I will persuade Imperial Consort Mother and make her let go. At least, I will fight for the position of secondary consort for you. I won't let you suffer any grievances. Qingyan, I know that you're considerate and reasonable. You'll definitely understand me. I was forced by the situation, so I'll make it up to you in the future. Saying this, Xiao Ran's mind suddenly flashed with a thought. His eyes burned as he looked at her. Qingyan, are you jealous? Saying this, he was very happy and immediately said, Don't worry, I only have you in my heart. Enough. Chu Qingyan shouted angrily, stopping him from continuing to spout nonsense. She used to think that he was only making mistakes because he was too stubborn about his feelings for her. Now that she heard what he was saying, she could only feel a chill in her heart. She looked at him faintly and pursed her lips. Xiao Ran, you keep saying that you're doing this for my own good, but you're just too selfish. You're just doing these things in the name of being good to me. That's why you're doing these despicable things with a clear conscience. In reality, it's all for yourself. Xiao Ran became anxious when he heard this. Qingyan, you've misunderstood me. I'm really treating you with sincerity. Is that so? Do you know what I really want? Chu Qingyan stared at him and didn't give him a chance to think. She continued coldly, No, I don't know. What I hate the most is men having multiple wives and concubines. They eat from a bowl and look at the pot. They treat women as accessories, a stepping stone and a helping hand. Xiao Ran opened his eyes wide and retorted, Since ancient times, which man didn't have 3 wives and 4 concubines? Besides, I've already explained that I'm engaged to Jing Mingzhu not because we love each other, but for the sake of the bigger picture. I'm sure she's well aware of this. Chu Qingyan looked at him quietly and finally sighed. Xiao Ran, do you know the difference between you and your imperial brother? You don't understand what I want, but your brother does, so he understands me. I want to be with him forever, and only he can give me that. Do you understand? You're already engaged, so don't think about anything else. Treat the person who'll be with you hand in hand for the rest of your life. No matter what the purpose of your union is, politics is politics, marriage is marriage. A girl is also a human being, not an object that can be sacrificed on the chessboard as you men wish. Xiao Ran opened his eyes wide and looked at her blankly. He didn't know what to say at this moment, because the words she said were both unfamiliar and fresh to him. However, he was even more frightened by the coldness in her words. At this moment, the sound of horse hooves could be heard. Xiao Ran subconsciously raised his head and saw the figure approaching. He was dressed in silver battle robes that fluttered in the wind. He was as cold as ice, making people not dare to look at him directly. Some people were just like this. They were born with a kind of aura that made people feel intimidated. Xiao Su was an outstanding talent. The soldiers and horses approached, and the two armies faced each other. Xiao Su came to his little fellow's side. He didn't greet Xiao Ran first, but asked her in a low voice, "Are you tired? Do you want to rest for a while? Please, my muscles and bones haven't loosened yet. Don't be in a hurry to send me off. All right, I won't disturb you two brothers from catching up. I'll take care of the people for you first." Chu Qingyan winked at him and smiled mischievously. "All right, let's go to the east," Xiao Su said with a faint smile. East? Chu Qingyan's eyes lit up. The big ice cube wouldn't give her direction for no reason. She immediately led her herd of beasts to the east. Qingyan, seeing her leave without looking back after hearing his call, Xiao Ran felt as if a bucket of ice water had been poured over his head, chilling him to the bone. He had been provoked by the two of them standing side by side, and now that she was ignoring him, he couldn't help trembling in anger. Chu Qingyan really didn't want to pay attention to him anymore. She had already said what she needed to say. If he continued to be so stubborn, he would only have himself to blame. Meeting each other was a kind of fate, but not every friend that met and knew each other would be able to walk together to the end. It could only be said that they were not fated to be together. She gave a light sigh and then quickly calmed her emotions. Her finger made a gesture, and the herd of beasts quickly charged towards the east. Xiao Ran took back his gaze from Chu Qingyan and turned to look coldly at the person in front of him. His eldest brother, the person he had respected since he was young, and the person who taught him how to conduct himself, was sometimes more like a father than his imperial father. But many things had changed, including his feelings for him. But towards his eldest brother, he still felt a trace of apology in his heart. "Eldest brother, I really like Qingyan. I'll let you down, but I don't regret it." He straightened his neck and seriously said this. Xiao Su lightly glanced at him. "Don't call me imperial brother anymore. I can't afford to be called that." Xiao Ran was stunned. It was like something had snapped in that moment. His heart slowly tightened, as if something had disappeared and would never appear again. And at this time, there was a sound coming from the east. Xiao Ran immediately turned his head to look, and a group of people quickly appeared in his field of vision. The person in the lead was Feng Lu. He had seen him before. He was stunned at first, and then his face filled with anger. Didn't he go to escort the provisions? Why would he appear here? You can do it secretly, so can this king. Xiao Su lightly said again. Xiao Ran looked at him in disbelief. Everything that had happened today had exceeded his expectations step by step. Feng Lu and the others had indeed gone to escort the provisions, but they had already returned. It was just that Xiao Su had been extra careful and had left them outside. Firstly, it was to protect the provisions, and secondly, it was to leave a backup plan. Looking at Lai Jun, who had met up with the little fellow, Xiao Su's lips curled slightly. A smile flashed through his eyes, but it quickly disappeared. He once again looked at the person in front of him. "Xiao Ran, your plan this time has actually succeeded, but you were too impatient. Originally, you should have trapped us for a few days, waiting for us to be exhausted and hungry before you acted. Perhaps you would have had a chance of victory, but you..." The unfinished words were self-evident. Chapter 14:16. It's a pity that you... As soon as Xiao Su finished speaking, Xiao Ran's expression changed. It was as if he had been seen through. His face turned red as he shouted, "Shut up! Even if I miscalculated, it's not certain who will win in the end. Don't be complacent too early." As soon as Xiao Ran finished speaking, he reacted. His face turned red, and he didn't dare to look at the person in front of him. He had never thought that there would be a day when he would be so rude to his eldest brother, even glaring at him. For a moment, he didn't know what to do, but he hated this feeling in his heart. Xiao Ran's extreme reaction fell into Xiao Su's eyes, but it only caused a small ripple. He sighed softly in his heart, as if something was slowly drifting away with the wind. "Since it's like this, then show me your true ability." Xiao Su didn't waste any more words. He pulled out the sword at his waist and pointed it at the moon, his eyes cold. Xiao Ran turned his head and met those cold black eyes. They didn't have the intimacy from before, only alienation and indifference. It was as if there were thousands of rivers and mountains between them, and that sword was shining with a silver light, piercing his eyes. He suddenly felt that there were many things that couldn't go back. "Your Highness, you mustn't be impulsive." The general beside him saw his absent-minded expression and was afraid that he would be swayed by his emotions after listening to Xiao Su's words. Xiao Ran came back to his senses. Seeing that the people around him didn't agree with him fighting with his eldest brother, he felt uncomfortable. They also thought that he was inferior to his eldest brother, like Qin Yin. Eldest brother was the Sichuan god of war, but he wasn't bad either. He just didn't have a chance to show it. He clenched his teeth and pulled out his sword. Ignoring everyone's dissuasion, he squeezed the horse's belly with his legs. One man and one horse left the army and came to Xiao Su. "I accept the challenge." He sat on the horse with his head held high and his chest out, looking confident. Xiao Su looked at him indifferently. "Let's begin." Xiao Su's cold demeanor made it seem as if he didn't put him in his eyes at all. He couldn't help but purse his lips. His fingers tightened around the hilt of his sword as he urged his warhorse to charge at Xiao Su. When the tip of the sword reached an inch in front of Xiao Su, it was blocked by his sword. Xiao Ran snorted, but he didn't dare to underestimate his opponent. His hand drew his sword and attacked again. Xiao Su's long sword blocked his attack again. His posture was calm and unhurried, as if he was taking a leisurely stroll. After several exchanges, Xiao Ran's attacks were fierce, but they were all countered by Xiao Su. Xiao Ran couldn't help but feel anxious. In the distance, Chu Qinyan was commanding a herd of beasts to surround a group of soldiers. Su Yi followed beside her and glanced at the people fighting in front of them. He couldn't help but ask, "Master, His Highness and the Fourth Prince are fighting. Do you want to go over and take a look? Leave this place to this subordinate to handle." Chu Qinyan heard this and turned to look at the two people who were locked in a fierce battle. She smiled lightly, and her voice carried a trace of amusement. "No need." Then she looked away and focused her attention on the enemy in front of her. Xiao Ran was not the big ice block's opponent. Hearing Master say this, a trace of surprise appeared in Su Yi's eyes. Was Master too confident in His Highness, or too confident? But he couldn't help but admit that in their eyes, His Highness was a valiant and omnipotent existence. As if to verify his thoughts, a cry of surprise came from afar. Then he saw Xiao Ran fall from the back of the horse and smash heavily on the ground. The dust on the ground splashed up, and he was in a very sorry state. Xiao Ran supported himself with both hands on the ground. The gravel scraped against his palms, like a blunt knife grinding against his flesh. It was slightly painful. However, his gaze was fixed on the long sword that had been flung away. He couldn't believe that he hadn't even exchanged 20 moves with his brother. Shame covered his heart. At this time, when the generals rushed over to help others, a sharp sword was placed in front of him, making him unable to move. He looked up in a daze and saw a pair of calm eyes looking down at him. "Xiao Ran, you still have a long way to go. Whether it's fighting for the little fellow or fighting for power with me, you still have a long way to go." Xiao Su's indifferent words pierced the inferiority in Xiao Ran's heart. His hands were tightly clasped to the ground, and he stared at him with red eyes. "Xiao Su, don't be too self-righteous. No matter how high your martial arts are, you are only one person. When two armies fight, it's a competition of who is better at scheming. Sooner or later, there will be a day when I surpass you." Xiao Su didn't pay attention to his words. Looking at him, his eyes were indifferent. "Your martial arts were taught by me. I know all of your weaknesses, not to mention your so-called army formation. If I wanted to defeat you, it would be as easy as turning my hand." Xiao Ran's face turned white. "Do you know why you could last 20 moves with me before?" Xiao Su looked at him, as if he was looking at his younger brother through him. "Because you're my younger brother. So is the older brother. How could he be so heavy-handed?" Xiao Ran's eyes widened as he stared at him in disbelief. Could it be that he had been letting him win in the past? There was no doubt about the answer. Otherwise, when he fought with his imperial brother today, he wouldn't have been so helpless. Xiao Su continued, "Just now, you said that the key to a battle between two armies is the commander's army formation. I admit that, but he paused and put away his sword. His gaze became lazy as he chuckled. Do you think you still have a chance to turn things around? As soon as he finished speaking, Xiao Ran's general's expression changed. Looking around, he found that they had lost nearly half of their men. The rest were too frightened by the ferocity of the beast horde to make a move. In short, it could be said that they had already lost. Xiao Ran also found a situation at this time. Other than the direction he came from, the other three directions had already been occupied by Xiao Su's people. Moreover, they were still eyeing them covetously. Just by fighting with Xiao Su for a short while, his men had already suffered heavy losses. Your Highness, we have to retreat quickly, the general on the side said anxiously. No, we have to fight it out with them. Xiao Ran stood up and grabbed the sword that his subordinate had picked up. Although he wasn't confident, he couldn't lose face. He couldn't be a person who ran away at the last minute. Otherwise, he wouldn't have the face to see Qin Yin in the future. Your Highness, if we delay any longer, I'm afraid we will be surrounded from all sides. At that time, it will be difficult to escape. That's right, Your Highness. Where there is life, there is hope. Let's go back and plan well. We will definitely find the best way. After listening to everyone's advice, Xiao Ran's heart relaxed. He couldn't die. If he died, he wouldn't be able to see Qin Yin again. A man should know when to yield and when to stand tall. He nodded with a cold face. Go, charge out from the back. Yes. At this time, a group of people appeared between Xiao Su and Xiao Ran, blocking Xiao Su and the others. Xiao Ran took the opportunity to escape with his men. Because of these people, Turin and the others didn't have time to care about Xiao Ran. They could only watch as they ran farther and farther away. Master, are we still going to chase? Turin asked. Don't chase a cornered enemy. Xiao Su only said these 4 words. At the same time, Hong Jianhua rode a horse with a panicked face. Lord, something happened. Chapter 14:17. What happened? Xiao Su frowned and looked at him. He had already warned him before, and now he was panicking like this again. He was afraid that something big had happened. At this time, Chu Qinyin had also gathered with her people. She happened to hear Hong Jianhua's call and immediately quickened her steps to Big Ice Cube's side. She also looked at him in confusion. Hong Jianhua was so flustered that he couldn't even form a sentence. He could only use his actions to show them. Following the direction that Hong Jianhua was pointing at, everyone was shocked to find that the forest they were in before had become a volcano, and the mountains in the distance were also affected. One mountain was connected to another, and the fire spread from one mountain to another. Coupled with the mountain wind, it looked like a fire dragon from afar. This was the literal meaning of fanning the flames. This is too scary. Chu Qinyin was so scared that she stuttered. Previously, she was only focused on dealing with the enemy and didn't notice that the fire had become so serious. She was afraid that if they didn't extinguish it, it wouldn't only affect the creatures inside, but also the surrounding towns. General Hong, General Jing, Turin, pulling, quickly lead the troops to put out the fire. Xiao Su's expression changed slightly when he saw the mountain that was spitting out tongues of fire. If he remembered correctly, there were several villages there. If they didn't stop it, the hundreds and thousands of lives would be swallowed up. Yes, at this critical moment, everyone had forgotten to deal with Xiao Ran and the others. They only had eyes and hearts to put out the fire. The people around him were taken away one by one. In the end, only Chu Qinyin was left by Xiao Su's side. What about me? I'll put out the fire too. Chu Qinyin pointed at herself. She thought that they had forgotten about her and immediately volunteered to lead the troops. However, just as she was about to move, she was stopped by the people beside her. Xiao Su looked at her helplessly. It doesn't matter whether you're there or not. But if you're not there, no one can control these things. Chu Qinyin, who was originally a little depressed because Big Ice Cube didn't let her go, heard his angry and funny words and couldn't help but follow his gaze. She saw Xiaohai leading the eagle formation and Bai Yutong leading the herd of beasts fighting for territory. Perhaps it was because the enemy had already dealt with everything that needed to be dealt with, and there was nothing for them to do. That was why they were looking for something to do. Chu Qingyan saw a little sea use its wings to pat by Yutong's head, indicating that it should take the group of beasts away. Its group of eagles had no place to rest, and Bai Yutong was unwilling to be left behind, so it swung its claws at little sea. Chu Qingyan finally understood why Big Ice Cube had such an expression. This group of idiots really didn't stop for a single day. She went forward with a dark face and spent a lot of effort to mediate between the two sides. In the end, both sides arrogantly led their people away from the empty space, and then each took a side, ignoring the other. Chu Qingyan looked at the empty space that had been fighting endlessly before and couldn't help but twitch her mouth. She really didn't understand the world of idiots. Big Ice Cube, they clearly look quite smart, but why are they so childish when they quarrel? Chu Qingyan walked to his side and couldn't help but complain. Xiao Su chuckled softly when he heard that. If we calculate according to the age of humans, they're at most 10 years old. What can you argue with a 10-year-old child? Chu Qingyan slapped her head. I almost forgot, they're still considered young among animals. Perhaps it was because these few had started to grow crazily after they came to her side. Now that she looked at them, they were huge beasts. She couldn't help but laugh, then looked up at him. Big Ice Cube, are you feeling better? Fighting with your own hands and feet, you must be in a bad mood, right? No matter how much she hated him, or how impatient she was with him, she had invested over 10 years of feelings into him. It wasn't something that could be taken back so easily. The faint smile in his eyes deepened because of her words, and he reached his hand out to her. Chu Qingyan didn't understand, but she still reached her hand out to give it to him. When she held his hand, he immediately tightened his grip, and she heard him say, "I'm happy with you." When she heard this, it was as sweet as honey. But before she could react, his arm exerted force, and her entire body was lifted off the back of the spotted tiger, and then she sat on the back of his horse. "Hey, this isn't good," she reacted, and her face immediately turned red. "What are you afraid of? Everyone knows that you're my wife. If anyone is unhappy, let them find another one." Xiao Su snorted disapprovingly. Chu Qingyan's face turned red when she heard the Big Ice Cube's words. Instead of feeling embarrassed, he was proud of it. If Huo Ling and the others heard this, they would feel like their mouths were stuffed with dog food. When Xiao Ran returned to the camp, he was told that only half of his 100,000 troops were left. He was so angry that he smashed everything he could, and in the end, he could only sit down in a chair. At this time, what entered his eyes was his torn battle clothes. Before leaving the capital, his lady mother had specially told him to wear it. She said it was indestructible and invulnerable, but now it was easily torn by his royal brother. He felt that he was just like the battle clothes he was wearing. It was simply a joke. "Your Highness, what should we do next?" 50,000 troops against the King of England's 100,000 troops is simply throwing an egg at a rock. Adding in his herd of beasts, our people won't have any advantages at all. If we don't handle it well, we might be completely wiped out. A general was worried and half afraid as he analyzed the situation. When these words fell, everyone's eyes fell on Xiao Ran. These eyes were asking for help, respectful, but there were also doubts and distrust. Xiao Ran was very clear that some of these people didn't belong to his faction. He knew a long time ago that they didn't trust his ability. Now that he had slapped himself in the face, he couldn't blame them for doubting his ability. If he wanted to restore his image, he had to defeat the eldest brother's people in the next battle. But even the cleverest housewife couldn't cook without rice, let alone a confrontation between manpower and manpower. He knew that if he fought with the eldest brother, they would be convinced, but he didn't have the ability and energy to do so right now. "I'll ask my royal father to give us more troops. I'm not afraid of the disparity in manpower." Xiao Ran squeezed this sentence out from the crack in the door. Everyone nodded. This was the only way. After discussing with everyone, Xiao Ran wrote a letter, put it in an envelope, and let someone take it back. However, these 2 days, Xiao Ran was very anxious, but there was no movement outside at all. However, At this moment, Yanshi walked in with a letter in his hand. "Your Highness, your letter is from the capital." Xiao Ran's eyes lit up. Could it be that his royal father had replied? Just as Xiao Ran excitedly opened the letter and browsed through it, his face turned pale little by little. "Lord, what's wrong with you?" Yanshi was so scared that his legs trembled. Xiao Ran took a deep breath, but still felt uncomfortable in his chest. Nansong Kingdom, Junlan Kingdom, and Lulan Kingdom have formed an alliance. Now they plan to use their iron hooves to trample over our country and nibble away our Sichuan. At the same time, Xiao Su had just received a letter from Xiao in the capital. Chapter 14:18. After Xiao Su finished reading the letter, his expression was subtle. Chu Qingyan, who had just entered, saw this scene and couldn't help but lean over. "What happened now?" Xiao Su directly handed the letter to her. "Take a look." Seeing him like this, something terrible must have happened. Chu Qingyan didn't say anything and took the letter. She read 10 lines at a time and carefully read it. The more she read, the more interesting her expression became. In the end, she couldn't help but laugh. Even the heavens aren't helping them. Xiao said in the letter that Nansong had persuaded Junlan and Lulan to send troops to Sichuan. Because the 3 countries were in 3 different places in Sichuan, they formed a 3-sided siege. It was fine if it was 1-on-1, but if it was 1 against 3, no matter how strong Sichuan's military was, they couldn't care less about the other side. Now, Sichuan Emperor was in a terrible fix. Xiao Su didn't comment. Now that they have internal and external troubles, even if they have 3 heads and 6 arms, they can't take care of everything. As long as one side falls, only destruction awaits them. Chu Qingyan analyzed objectively. Xiao Su nodded. Attend to one thing and lose sight of the other. Chu Qingyan agreed. Then she thought of something. Big ice block. Sichuan's current strength is enough to deal with the 3 countries. Do they have a chance of winning? Xiao Su laughed lightly. Although Nansong suffered heavy losses last time, they still have hundreds of thousands of troops. Junlan's national strength isn't great, but it's more than enough to send out 200,000 troops. But Lulan, he paused, his tone uncertain. This country is very mysterious. They don't have much contact with the surrounding countries. It's also an area that Xiao-like cavalry doesn't know. However, I heard that they're good at using goo poison. Although the country doesn't occupy a large area, it's not a country to be underestimated. Sichuan, apart from Li Wei Yuan's 200,000, Xiao Ran's only 50,000, plus the imperial guards and troops from other places, doesn't exceed 400,000. However, before Xiao Su could finish his sentence, Chu Qingyan continued. Theoretically speaking, with so many soldiers, they wouldn't have the time to deal with the encirclement of the 3 nations. That's because it's impossible to transfer all these soldiers to the front lines at once. Furthermore, the enemy's attack was sudden, and every nation sent their best soldiers. Perhaps Shi Xian had already started to panic. No matter which side they went to support, they wouldn't have enough soldiers. At most, they could only delay the enemy's attack, but they wouldn't be able to stop it. In the end, they would all be nibbled away by the enemy. How do I know how he'll deal with the enemy? She snorted and asked. Her dislike of Sichuan Emperor had already risen to the level of loathing. How could such a narrow-minded and selfish person be worthy of being the ruler of country? Whenever she thought of his battered appearance, she felt her mood lighten up. You. Xiao Su bent his finger and knocked her on the head. When she covered her head and glared at him, he withdrew his hand. His expression changed from relaxed to serious. If it weren't for the internal strife, the 3 countries of Nansong wouldn't have taken advantage of the situation to invade. However, the emperor can only blame himself for this. It's just that when the nest is overturned, there are no intact eggs. If Shi Xian falls, the people won't be able to live in peace. Chu Qingyan stared blankly. She had only been thinking about the Sichuan emperor's enmity, but had forgotten to consider the price behind it. Her expression also became serious. Xiao Su saw her tense expression, and the seriousness from before immediately dissipated. His eyes revealed a faint smile. It won't come to that. Chu Qingyan didn't understand what he meant for a while. She looked at him blankly. Xiao Su smiled and reached out to stroke her head. His movements were doting. Don't be afraid. I'll protect you. She felt the image of a big ice cube suddenly grow, but she still said seriously, you don't have to be afraid. I have Xiao Hai and the others. I'll also protect you. Xiao Su's eyes were filled with warmth. In the past, when he was alone, no one had ever said such words to him. Because everyone thought that he was strong enough and invincible, everyone sought his protection. But very few people asked him if he was tired or if he needed a shoulder. But now, this delicate little girl in front of him was standing on her tiptoes, trying her best to hold up the sky with her hands. He wasn't a cold-hearted person, so how could he not be moved? His fingers slid down her soft black hair to her cheeks. Her smooth skin was as smooth and warm as jade, making him unable to let go. He softly said, as a 9-feet-tall man, how can I let my wife be in danger? As long as I'm here, I won't let anyone hurt you. These words made her very happy, but she couldn't help but ask, then what if you're not here? Seeing through her thoughts, he chuckled. The movements of his fingers became even gentler. Even if I'm not here, I'll still arrange for your future. When she heard this, she immediately slapped away his hands that were constantly taking advantage of her. She harumphed. Who cares about the future? If you dare to abandon me, I'll make trouble for you until your next life, and the one after that. You won't be able to live in peace. Xiao Su smiled and pulled her into his embrace. He lowered his head and lightly kissed her pink lips. All right, you won't be able to live in peace. Hearing the teasing tone in his words, she straightened her neck and decided to ignore him for 2 hours. But how could Xiao Su let her do that? He caressed her back and said, let me test you. What do you think Xiao Ran will do? Chu Qingyan's mind began to work quickly. In an instant, she forgot about the decision she made. I'm guessing that he'll leave a portion of his people to restrain us, and then bring the rest to the front lines? As she said this, she raised her head to look at him. But when she saw his smile that wasn't a smile, she became less and less confident. He won't do that, because he knows that these people won't be able to restrain me. In the end, he'll just raise a tiger and cause trouble. He's worried that he won't be able to deal with the Allied forces, and I'll become the biggest threat instead. After all, Southern Blue and the others are attacking from the outside, while I'll attack from the inside and destroy them from the inside. Then what do you mean? She was a little confused. He'll ask for a ceasefire. Xiao Su lightly tugged his lips into a cold smile. He was his disciple, and there was probably no one who understood him better than him. Sure enough, that afternoon, Xiao Su received a ceasefire agreement from Xiao Ran. Chu Qingyan looked at the person in front of her with starry eyes. Big ice block, you're practically a god with foresight. Xiao Su chuckled. It's not that I'm smart, but that this is the only path in front of him. He has no choice but to choose it. However, there should be another way. But Xiao Ran's skin wasn't that thick. But the one in the capital might be different. Then what do you think? Do you accept it, or take the opportunity to take them down? Chu Qingyan blinked and licked her lips like a mischievous spirit. This them wasn't referring to Xiao Ran's army, but the people in the capital. Chapter 1419. The atmosphere was originally very solemn, but Xiao Su didn't know whether to laugh or cry at her childish and excited expression. He tapped his fingers on the table and looked at the dirty subordinates standing below. His eyes narrowed, and he revealed a fox-like smile. Of course it's to accept. The army works day and night to put out the fire. How can they have the energy to fight now? Chu Qingyan and the others were puzzled. This reason seemed to be very far-fetched. However, Xiao Su's words were full of treachery, and everyone couldn't help but shiver. Usually, when the Lord revealed such an expression, it meant that someone was going to be unlucky. They immediately put down their worries and echoed, yes, what we need most now is to recover our energy. Even the Heavenly King can't control us. Xiao Su was satisfied with everyone's reaction. He waved his hand and let them rest. After all, They had been fighting the fire for a few days, and their physical strength had reached its limit. After everyone left, Chu Qingyan strolled in front of him and placed her hands on his table. She stared at him suspiciously, as if she wanted to see a flower on his face. Xiao Su allowed her to size him up, but didn't say anything. Finally, she couldn't hold it in and tapped the table with her fingers. She took the initiative to ask, "Big ice block, what are you planning?" Xiao Su raised his brows. "Nothing much. Everyone is tired and should rest well." As he spoke, he touched his chin and praised himself. "Don't you think I'm a general who empathizes with his subordinates?" Chu Qingyan snorted, looking like she didn't believe him. Xiao Su broke his facade and couldn't hide the smile in his eyes. "I'm just teasing you. I have my own plans." Hearing him say this, her guess was confirmed. She breathed a sigh of relief in her heart, and a smile appeared on her face. Although she had a grudge against the Sichuan emperor, the people were innocent. She also didn't want to see the Sichuan kingdom turn into a river of blood. This was the place where the big ice block grew up. She didn't want it to disappear. Moreover, after the big ice block met up with the army, he didn't leave, but stayed here to wait for Xiao Ran. This was because this was a battlefield. No matter how fierce the battle was, it wouldn't hurt the people. So even if the Sichuan emperor did so many heinous things, the big ice block still cared for the people. The big ice block who cared about the world and was merciful. She felt that he wasn't worth it. But wasn't this also his personal charm? She was attracted to him to be this character. Seeing that she was distracted, Xiao Su thought that she was worried about him again. He couldn't help but add, "Don't worry. I won't forget what they did to you and me. This time, I'll teach them a thorough lesson." Chu Qingyan came back to her senses. Her eyes lit up. It seemed that he was preparing a big move. She knew that he wouldn't tell her even if she asked, so she didn't pester him. Anyway, he and Xiao Ho were already working together. Both of them were shrewd foxes. They wouldn't lose out no matter what. In the distance, Xiao Ho suddenly sneezed. He touched his nose and was a little confused. Who was talking behind his back? When Xiao Ran received Xiao Su's reply, although he had achieved his goal, he didn't know why he felt very conflicted. Originally, they were on opposite sides. They should have fought to the death. However, now that the enemy was invading, he wanted to take the initiative to ask for peace. Clearly, he had challenged him before, but now he was lowering himself to negotiate with him. He really wanted to laugh out loud. Even the heavens were on his imperial brother's side. How sullen. But what could he do? He couldn't just watch the enemy country tear their country apart and swallow it up. Xiao Ran crumpled the letter in his hand into a ball and slammed it on the table. There was nowhere to vent the anger in his heart. He had to suffer, but couldn't say anything. Yinshu saw him like this and felt very uncomfortable in his heart. After all, he had watched this man plan all the way. As long as the reinforcements arrived, the King of England and the others wouldn't be a threat at all. However, such a thing happened at the crucial moment. Now, he could only lower himself to negotiate with the other party. No man with courage could swallow this. Fortunately, His Royal Highness was a man who endured humiliation and put the overall situation first. Your Royal Highness, although the King of England has agreed, I am worried that he will go back on his word halfway. Insure expressed his worries. These words were echoed by many generals. Realizing that he didn't control his emotions well and lost his composure in front of his subordinates, Xiao Ran immediately restrained his expression. He coughed softly and replied, "You don't have to worry about this. My brother is a man of his word. Since he has promised, he will fulfill it. Moreover, he has the people in his heart. After all, this is the country he has protected for more than 10 years. No one knew his brother better than him. Although it was rumored that his brother was cold-blooded and ruthless, if he was really ruthless, then no one in the world would be affectionate and righteous. Since he was a child, he had seen him carry the responsibility and move forward with difficulty, wholeheartedly for this country." Hearing this, someone stood up and said excitedly, "Can your Royal Highness persuade the King of England to put aside his grudges for the time being and fight the enemy with us?" Xiao Ran heard this, and a bitter smile appeared on his face. It's already his limit that he doesn't intervene. If you want him to help, he didn't continue but sighed and shook his head. Just as he understood that his brother was affectionate and righteous, he also understood that his eldest brother might never do anything for the Sichuan royal family in the future. And he didn't have the face to ask him to help when the two sides fell out. Even if he went, he would only be humiliating himself. Moreover, his pride didn't allow him to bow down to him. From the moment he walked out of the capital, there was a barrier between him and his brother that couldn't be crossed. Seeing that the others still wanted to say something, Xiao Ran's face suddenly darkened. Don't think about this anymore. We will break camp in an hour. If there are any more objections, you will be dealt with according to military law. As soon as these words came out, everyone immediately fell silent and quickly left. When there was no one else, Xiao Ran pursed his lips and flipped the entire table. The floor was in a mess. He held a breath in his heart. There was bitterness and resentment that he couldn't express. When the news came that Xiao Ran was leaving with the soldiers, Chu Qingyan was standing at the foot of the mountain with her big ice cube to watch the soldiers clean up the mountain. Occasionally, she would see people carrying roasted birds and beasts out with smiles. Because the fire had come too suddenly and too fiercely, many of the animals had been swallowed by the fire before they could react. In the past 2 days, the soldiers had found them when they were putting out the fire. Chu Qingyan had suggested to Xiao Su when she learned of this. Xiao Su waved his hand and had them go into the mountain to pick them up and give them to the kitchen as a reward for putting out the fire. This made everyone's spirits rise, and they worshipped Chu Qingyan even more. They had a realization that there was meat to eat if they followed Wang Fei. He's a person who knows what's important and what's not, Xiao Su said faintly. Knowing who he was talking about, Chu Qingyan sighed. It's just that his character isn't good. Wanting to take his brother's wife. How good could his character be? If it wasn't for their past friendship, she probably would have felt disgust at even looking at him. She really was blind at the time to be friends with him. Her heart was very bitter. Suddenly, she felt her hand warm. She raised her head to look at the person beside her. She saw him hold her hand even tighter. His eyes were full of pity as he said, "Don't deny the past. At least from the beginning, he really thought of you as a friend." Chu Qingyan stilled. In the end, the corners of her mouth slowly turned up as she nodded heavily. When Xiao Ho received the reply, he was first in disbelief. Then he put down the letter and smiled as he shook his head and said to Lin Jiangdong in front of him, "Imperial brother is too sly." Chapter 1420. After Lin Jiangdong received the approval, he took the letter and looked at it. His reaction was even more exaggerated than his master's. This, Jiangdong, aren't you glad that you didn't go against eldest brother again? Seeing his subordinate's reaction, Xiao Ho chuckled. He was in a very good mood. Yes, it seems that His Royal Highness was merciful back then. Lin Jiangdong trembled and twitched the corner of his mouth. He was still in a state of shock. Xiao Ho laughed, then rested his face on one hand and gloated. It can only be said that Imperial Father and the other stepped on Imperial Brother's bottom line this time. Lin Jiangdong deeply agreed and rejoiced. I'm very grateful that His Royal Highness didn't kill me back then. Feeling that Lord's mood was not as gloomy as before, Lin Jiangdong joked to make Lord feel better. As expected, Xiao Ho looked at him with smiling eyes. Has this prince treated you too well recently? You actually dare to tease this prince's imperial brother? There is no blame in his words, only a joke. Lin Jiangdong said with a smile, this one was rude. When His Royal Highness returns, this one will definitely take the initiative to apologize. You'll believe it even if I say it. Xiao Ho laughed and shook his head. He murmured softly, I wonder when he will return. Although his voice was low, Lin Jiangdong still heard it in the quiet room. He thought for a moment and comforted, Lord, don't be impatient. If His Royal Highness' plan succeeds, it won't be long before His Royal Highness can return in triumph and reunite with Lord. Reunite? He repeated these 2 words in a daze. It was as if strength suddenly poured into his body from the soles of his feet and filled his body. He came back to his senses and realized that he was looking forward to Imperial Brother's return. Yes, according to His Royal Highness' letter, he will return to the capital, and with such a well-planned plan, as long as nothing unexpected happens, your revenge will be just around the corner. Xiao curled his lips slightly and rubbed his chin. You are right. Then do as Imperial Brother said in the letter. There must be no mistakes, especially those in the palace. They're not easy to deal with. Tell your subordinates to be careful and efficient. If they are discovered, then it will not be as simple as wasting all your previous efforts. If he failed, then the crime would be huge. He might even be charged with treason. This matter was of great importance. Lin Jiangdong immediately nodded and promised, this one will definitely not disappoint the Lord. Xiao nodded and gave a few more instructions. Lin Jiangdong agreed to them one by one. Before he left, he confirmed, does the Lord have any other instructions? Hearing this, Xiao subconsciously wanted to wave his hand, but just as he raised his hand, he paused. He thought carefully for a while, then took the green jade pendant hanging from his waist and said with a smile, give this jade pendant to Lin Ming and tell him to listen to the King of England's commands in the future. I believe that he is in need of manpower now. Lin Jiangdong looked at the jade pendant in the Lord's hand in disbelief. This was not an ordinary jade pendant, but a military seal. It was the army that the Lord had cultivated for many years. What did the Lord's action mean? There was no need to guess. It was just that he did not expect the Lord to give it to the King of England so generously. It was not until he heard a light cough that he hurriedly reached out with both hands to take it. The Lord, this is the force that you have cultivated for many years. Hearing Lin Jiangdong's careful probing, Xiao smiled indifferently. Soldiers are trained for 1,000 days to be used in a single moment. A good sword should be used on the blade. Now is a good time. Lin Jiangdong thought about it and agreed, but he hesitated. Your Highness, aren't you worried that you can't get the army back? Xiao laughed, as if he had heard the funniest joke in the world. Jiangdong, not everyone is like my father, burning the bridge after crossing the river and getting rid of the donkey after it has outlived its usefulness. If you can't trust my brother's character, then I don't think there is anyone else in this world who can be trusted. Lin Jiangdong thought about the King of England's actions over the years and couldn't help but nod with an ashamed expression. It is this one who has gauged the heart of a gentleman with the yardstick of a villain. It's fine. You're also thinking for me, but Xiao said, his smile suddenly becoming fainter. These soldiers, I have given them away and have no intention of getting them back. Perhaps these people will be more useful in his hands. These words shocked Lin Jiangdong even more than before. But no one could change the decision made by the Lord, except for Princess Pang Zhijing. Unfortunately, she was no longer in this world. Lin Jiangdong felt that the Lord was making arrangements for his death. When this thought flashed through his mind, he couldn't help but want to slap himself. He immediately bowed and asked to leave. This one understands. If the Lord has nothing else, this one will leave. Xiao waved his hand and let him leave. After the door was closed, the sound of footsteps slowly faded away. Xiao gathered his thoughts, and his gaze fell on the envelope again. The ink on the yellow cover glowed in the firelight. The handwriting was elegant and flamboyant. The smile at the corner of his mouth deepened. Without the restraints of blood and responsibility, the eldest brother seemed to be living more and more freely. That was his wish in the past. He always thought that after getting his revenge, he could live the way he wanted. Now, he no longer had any thoughts of walking in this world. The only thing that had supported him until now was those grudges. It was good to see someone achieve his original wish for him. So, he had to protect him well. Imperial Brother, when you return, it will be the day when the dust settles. In the Sichuan Imperial Palace, a sharp and crisp sound cut through the silence in the room, but it brought with it an even more deathly atmosphere. The Sichuan Emperor panted. The venting just now had left him somewhat powerless. In just half a month, he appeared to be old. He was not like in the past, when he was over 50 years old but vigorous. It was unknown whether it was because he had been tired recently or because he was ill, but he seemed to have aged 10 years. But right now, his eyes were filled with anger. The dragon's might was still there. He glared angrily at the officials in front of him and scolded. What the hell are you doing? Didn't you already send a large army? Why can't you even defend the city? Previously, the other party attacked suddenly. You said you didn't have time to respond, and I will not pursue the matter. Now that it has happened so long ago, you still want to use the excuse that you didn't have time to prepare? Your Majesty, please calm your anger. The officials of the imperial court knelt in front of the table. The case of Prime Minister Liang and Prime Minister Fu had implicated many officials. Now, many of them had been promoted directly from assistant ministers. The teacup that the Sichuan emperor had thrown earlier shattered on the ground. Some of the officials' robes were stained with tea leaves, while others were splashed with boiling tea. But no one dared to move an inch. Your Majesty, the Southern Song nation came prepared. They came in a menacing manner, and all of them were elites. Before General Li's men arrived, the Southern Song army had already broken through the city. Although the soldiers sent by the Junlan nation weren't as elite as the Southern Song nation, they outnumbered the Southern Song nation by nearly double. We simply didn't have enough men. Fine, the Southern Song and the Junlan kingdom are both reasonable. What about the Lulan kingdom? How do you explain that? The Sichuan emperor was so angry that he wanted to smash the table. The Lulan kingdom is simply a terrifying existence. The Minister of War's shoulders trembled as if he was talking about a ghost. He couldn't even speak clearly. Chapter 1421. Speak. Sichuan emperor's anger flared up when he saw his subjects' demeaning expression. The Minister of War was afraid that the Assistant Minister of War would say something wrong and anger the emperor again. So he immediately replied, Your Majesty, although Lulan doesn't have as many soldiers as the other two countries, their true weapon isn't their people, but their poison, especially those strange animals they keep around their soldiers. Some are poisonous birds, some are poisonous snakes, and none of them have ever been seen before. As long as they release those animals, our soldiers won't dare to approach them and will be defeated. Sichuan emperor was slightly taken aback. He had ruled the country for so long, but he had never heard of using such a method to fight a war. Moreover, it was from a small country that he had never paid attention to. Sichuan emperor was very unhappy at this moment. He felt like he was being suppressed by a small country. His anger didn't subside. Instead, it rose. No matter what method the other party uses, can't you think of a way? There are many things in the world that have a weakness. I don't believe that they don't have a natural enemy. The ministers looked at each other. They had thought of what His Majesty had said, but they had never seen or heard of those animals. They hadn't even been recorded in books. The Ministry of War had flipped through books for several days and still came up empty-handed. Your Majesty, this humble subject has something to say, but I'm not sure if it's appropriate. The Minister of Works raised his head. Although his back was straight, his arms by his sides couldn't help but tremble, revealing his current emotions. Usually, this wasn't something pleasant to hear, but the ministers in front of him were shrinking their necks. They didn't have any way to deal with the enemy. Sichuan emperor also lost the mood to reprimand them. He waved his hand casually. Say what you want to say. The Minister of Works was afraid that he wouldn't have the courage to say it later. After hearing His Majesty's permission, he immediately said, Your Majesty, we need people now. Can you ask the King of England to come back? He has many strange people under his command. They might be able to deal with the people of Lulan. After speaking, he immediately lowered his head. If he stuck his head out, he would be stabbed. He might as well say it directly. As soon as he said this, the hall instantly fell silent. It was as if they could hear their own breathing. After the Minister of Works finished speaking, the others lowered their heads even more. This was their inner voice, as well as that of the court's officials. It was just that they didn't dare to say it out loud. They were afraid that if they angered the emperor, they would never be able to rise again. Now that someone had spoken for them, they couldn't help but sigh of relief. At the same time, they were afraid of Sichuan emperor's reaction. The Xixian emperor's face froze. He didn't expect that someone would speak up for Xiao Su when he started a rebellion. He couldn't help but be so angry that his lips trembled. However, he knew very well that Li Weiyuan's ability was not as good as his. That child, had too little experience in leading troops, so it was inevitable that she would be at a disadvantage. Half of the generals in the court were either involved in the Liang and Fu families' cases or were useless, and this war didn't happen before Xiao Su started the war. It also didn't happen after he finished dealing with Xiao Su. At this moment, Xishuan felt as if the heavens wanted him dead. He wanted to vent his anger on the Minister of Works, but when he opened his mouth, he saw a row of expectant gazes. He subconsciously shut his mouth. Now that the three countries were in an alliance, most of the generals in the court had been sent out. Many of the civil officials had been sent to supervise the army. In addition to those who had been imprisoned, there weren't many people left in the court who could be used. If he made trouble again, there would be even fewer people who could do things. Therefore, even though he knew that they were all here to persuade him, he couldn't punish them. For the first time, Xishuan Emperor felt powerless. He was the ruler of a country, but he couldn't do as he wished. It was really sullen. All of you are dismissed. Let me think about it. Xishuan Emperor held his forehead, looking as if he didn't want to see them. The people who had escaped disaster immediately took their leave. However, before they left, the Minister of Works didn't forget to say a few more words that shouldn't be said. For the country and the people, Your Majesty, please think thrice before you act. I believe that His Royal Highness won't disregard the country and the world because of personal grudges. After saying that, the Minister of Works immediately slipped away. The others chimed in with a few words and also ran away. Xishuan Emperor sneered. They usually walked like snails, but now they were like dogs chasing after him. After everyone left, the energy in his body dissipated. Xishuan Emperor immediately collapsed on the back of the chair. He was like a fish out of water, constantly breathing. He didn't know what had happened recently, but his physical fitness had been very poor. He couldn't breathe after saying a few words. If he hadn't forced himself to hold on today, his officials would have found out. Now that there were internal and external troubles, if news of his serious illness spread, the entire Xishuan would be in chaos. The ruler was the pillar of the country. He couldn't fall. Xiao Ji, bring the medicine. Eunuch Xiao had been standing outside for a long time. When he heard the summons, he immediately pushed the door open and came in. Your Majesty, the medicine is here. Xishuan Emperor didn't say anything. He drank the medicine in one gulp and then exhaled heavily. This medicine tastes terrible. Your Majesty, good medicine tastes bitter. The imperial doctor said that you'll be cured after drinking it for a few more days. Eunuch Xiao immediately handed over the candied fruit. Xishuan Emperor waved his hand and rubbed between his eyebrows with his fingers. His expression was very bad. Xiao Ji, why does everyone want him to come back? Eunuch Xiao had heard the conversation of several officials outside the hall before they left. Naturally, he knew who His Majesty was referring to. He hesitated for a moment before saying, Your Majesty, are you referring to His Royal Highness? This old servant thinks that it might be because of His Highness's title of War God. Victorious in every battle? Xishuan Emperor sneered. Eunuch Xiao immediately shut up when he heard the frightening laughter. He didn't dare to say anything more. Xishuan Emperor laughed. We've already broken off relations. At this point, will he still help me? Even if he agrees, I'm afraid that he'll take the throne instead. Eunuch Xiao wanted to nod vigorously. Even if His Highness didn't help His Majesty, he would help the common people. However, he knew that His Majesty didn't want to hear this at all, so he didn't dare to say a word. Let me think about it. Xishuan Emperor sighed faintly. Eunuch Xiao felt that he seemed to have aged several years. At this moment, the young Minister of Works, who was still trembling with fear in the imperial study, immediately calmed down after bidding farewell to his colleagues and getting on the carriage. He seemed to be talking to himself to the air. Tell Prince E that His Majesty has wavered. I'll persuade him with the other officials. Don't worry, Your Majesty. The Minister of Works was someone that Xiao Ho placed beside the Minister of Works. On the surface, he worked for the imperial court, but in reality, he worked for Xiao Ho. After that, someone responded, and then there was no more sound. The Minister of Works smiled. In fact, His Majesty had long wanted Xiao Su to come back to help, but he couldn't bring himself to ask. He believed that as long as they tried a few more times, they would succeed. Let's go. Chapter 1422. In the evening, Chu Qingyan and Xiao Su had dinner with Mr. and Mrs. Chu. While they were eating, Mr. Chu suddenly asked, "Will we be homeless if we stick a spring onion in the back?" Everyone at the table was confused by his question. Xiao Su was the first to react. "Why would you say that, old master?" Mr. Chu rubbed his nose and said, "Honestly, I heard someone say that many people are attacking our country today. They're saying that the warehouse country, the flower country, the building country, and so on. They're going to eat up Sichuan very soon. We're going to live a life of misery in the future." Chu Qingyan could not help but twitch her lips. Where did her father hear that from? It was one thing to use the wrong idiom, but how could he make such a sophisticated name sound so down-to-earth? Her father was so talented. Although Mr. Chu was telling the truth, Xiao Su could not help but smile. Mrs. Chu could not help blushing and hurriedly explained for her husband, "Your father heard it from someone else, but he can't remember it clearly. That's why he made a fool of himself." Xiao Su said it was fine, then turned to Mr. Chu and said, "We won't be homeless, and we won't live a life of misery. I can promise you that." Chu Qingyan really wanted to laugh, but since Big Ice Block had said so, she immediately stopped smiling and said to her parents in a serious tone, "Father, Mother, don't worry. We will protect you. Also, as long as you are here, anywhere is home." Mrs. Chu nodded happily. She had not misjudged her son-in-law. Her daughter was also very capable. She felt that her life was complete. Mr. Chu also put on a serious expression and nodded. However, he did not look handsome or serious for more than 3 seconds. Mr. Chu blinked and said to his son-in-law, "Stick a spring onion in the back? Do you need more people? The kind who can fight." When she walked out of her parents' tent, Chu Qingyan was still in a state where her body and soul were separated. It wasn't until someone bowed to them that her soul quickly returned to its original position. She strode forward and caught up with the person in front of her. Puzzled, she asked, "Big Ice Block, why didn't you refuse Daddy's request? It's rare for the old master to have something to do, and it's out of kindness. As a junior, I shouldn't dampen his enthusiasm." Xiao Su knew that she would ask such a question, so he smiled. "That's true, but why do you need him to defeat with spirit and ethereal?" Chu Qingyan asked a question that confused her even more. "Because the two of them have the most free time right now." "That's not what I mean." Xiao Su stopped and turned to look at her with a smile. "Do you think the old man can beat the two of them?" Chu Qingyan shook her head without even thinking about it. Xiao Su raised his hand and scratched her nose. "That's right. What's a better way to persuade people than to let them back down? Won't the problem be solved then? It won't dampen the old man's spirits, and it will achieve its goal. Isn't it the best of both worlds?" Chu Qingyan couldn't care less about being teased. She thought that the big ice cube was right. Seeing him walk away, she couldn't help but raise her feet to follow. A thought suddenly flashed through her mind. What if Daddy really did it? However, this thought was quickly rejected by her. She shook her head and immediately ran towards him. When the two of them entered the main tent, there were already people waiting for them. Guoling and Turin bowed to the two of them. Then, without needing Xiao Su's instructions, Turin began to report. "So far, the Southern Song Army has taken down 5 cities. The Junlan country has taken down 3, and the Lulan country has taken down 3. The number is still rising and has affected nearly 20 cities. Right now, Li Weiyuan has split up with 200,000 soldiers to stop the Southern Song Army in the Junlan country. The 4th prince is leading troops to the Lulan country, but he still can't catch up to their speed of taking down the cities." Xiao Su frowned. He didn't expect the 3 countries to be so fast. Were they too weak, or were the other side too strong? At this moment, Chu Qingyan couldn't help but ask, "The Lulan country has the fewest people. Why did they take down the same number of cities as the Junlan country? I remember that the defenses of those cities aren't weak. How did they take down 3 cities so quickly?" This question was exactly what Xiao Su was puzzled about. Guoling immediately whimpered, "Masters, you don't know. According to our brothers, those people from the Lulan country aren't easy to deal with. They carry poison with them. Once released, it can make people retreat without a fight. It's very scary. Poison? Chu Qingyin thought of the scorpions, centipedes, and cobras all over the ground. Her whole body itched. Although what she imagined was different from the poison in the Lulan country, at least the toxicity was similar. What kind of background does the Lulan country have? Chu Qingyin couldn't help but rub her arms. Hualing shook his head, his expression ugly. Although we don't know much about it, it can be traced back to 100 years ago. Our Empress Dowager sent troops to take over the Lulan country, but halfway through, 100,000 troops never returned. They didn't leave behind any corpses. It's very strange. The Empress Dowager sent people to investigate for many years, but to no avail. It's as if these 100,000 people disappeared from the face of the earth. No one has seen them since. Could it be that those people were treated as food and eaten by poison? Chu Qingyin's face paled. This was already beyond the description of scary. Xiao Su's expression darkened. Hualing, have Water Spirit investigate the Lulan country. Hualing didn't delay and immediately left the tent. What's the news from the capital? Xiao Su asked. A while ago, the third prince used some tricks to make the Liang and Fu families fight each other like dogs. His Majesty was furious and imprisoned many officials. Now that the three countries are attacking, there aren't many people in court that can be used. The third prince's move is giving His Majesty a headache. Someone has already suggested that you return, but His Majesty is putting on airs. Although he said he would consider it, he actually wanted you to return long ago. He's just too embarrassed to ask. Now, he's borrowing someone in court to ask. When the time is right, he'll definitely relent. Xiao Su nodded. It was as he guessed. Oh, that's right. Master, this is the letter the third prince sent over. There's also a jade pendant inside. Turin immediately took out the two items and handed them over. Xiao Su took the jade pendant and played with it. He saw the word thick written on it. Confusion appeared in his eyes. This should be something that his third brother carried with him or had some special meaning. But why'd he send this to him? Xiao Su opened the letter with confusion. After quickly skimming through the message, Xiao Su's furrowed brows immediately relaxed. This change made Chu Qingyin happy as well. What did the third prince write in the letter to make you so happy? Xiao Su reached out his hand in front of her. The jade pendant fell from his fingertips, and the red thread was wrapped around his ring finger. Through the light of the fire, she looked carefully but couldn't find anything. She heard the person in front of her say, I was just vexed about the troops when third brother sent me a solution. 100,000 troops. Chapter 1423. 100,000? Chu Qingyin was stunned. Big Ice Cube, are you telling the truth? Of course. Xiao Su patted her little head and turned to give the jade pendant to Turin. Take it and go to Lion Ridge to find a man named Lin Meng. Turin was also shocked by the news. He took the jade pendant in a daze and didn't know how to react. I'll do it right away. After Turin went out, Xiao Su saw the little fellow reading his third brother's letter from top to bottom. Although there were only a few lines, she seemed to be able to see through them. He couldn't help but take the letter away and raise his eyebrows. Third brother's handwriting is so beautiful. Chu Qingyin was amused by his words. She glanced at him and said, Are you jealous? My big ice cube has become a big vinegar jar again? Xiao Su looked at her with disdain. What's there to be jealous about? If you want to appreciate calligraphy, just come and find me. How could he say that he wasn't jealous? Chu Qingyin said in her heart, but she didn't dare to tell the truth. Okay, you're not jealous. There's no smell of jealousy at all. Back to the topic. How did Princey get so many soldiers? Could it be that he had thought of? She didn't say the word rebellion out loud. She only mouthed it. Xiao Su read her lips and chuckled. That's not the case. Before the truth of the Luo family was revealed, I'm afraid these people were prepared for me. It was only then that Chu Qingyin recalled the fight between the two of them. She couldn't help but suck in a deep breath. Patting her chest, she said with some lingering fear, Fortunately, the truth is out. Otherwise, you would have to bear the blame. Maybe the emperor and the Fu family were the ones who tried to frame the Liang family. Otherwise, there wouldn't be so many coincidences that made third brother think that it was my mother and the Liang family who did it. Xiao Su's expression was indifferent. When he talked about the Sichuan emperor, it was as if he was talking about an outsider. Chu Qingyan nodded heavily. When it comes to framing others, no one dares to claim to be the best. She paused and sighed with emotion. Prince Yi's forbearance is admirable. He has kept a low profile for so many years and raised so many troops without being discovered. If he didn't have a strong willpower and a smart mind, he wouldn't have been able to do it. He was born with a weak constitution and had encountered so many poisons as he grew up. To be able to survive until now and even control a faction, such a person would be terrifying if he were an enemy. Fortunately, the two of them had not reached the point where they would meet on the battlefield. Which member of the imperial family is stupid? Xiao Su mocked. Those who could stay must have gone through inhuman training. The law of the jungle was the law of survival in this world. When she heard him say this, she couldn't help but think of what Big Ice Block had gone through all those years. She couldn't help but feel sorry for him. She reached out and held his fingers. Yes, a sword's edge is sharpened. My Big Ice Block is already a good sword out of its sheath. Now it's time to collect the debt from those people. He didn't care about the past. He wasn't someone who would hold on to the past. However, when he saw the tenderness and love in the little fellow's eyes, he curled his lips and a touch of sadness appeared on his face. It was as if he was trapped in the past and couldn't extricate himself. If only I had met you earlier. Those years wouldn't have been so lonely. Chu Qingyan's heart was filled with sadness for him. When she heard what he said, her heart softened even more. She reached out and hugged his waist, patting his back gently, as if she was comforting an injured child. It's all in the past. Besides, aren't I right in front of you? We have to live in the present. The pain of the past is the metal of our glory. There is always a price to pay for growth. Ian is right. Xiao Su buried his head in her shoulder and smelled the unique fragrance of her body. He hugged her tightly with both hands and took advantage of the little fellow's tofu with peace of mind. Chu Qingyan didn't notice his little movements. After comforting him, she turned her attention to Xiao Ho. Big Ice Block, I still find it unbelievable that Prince Yi would give all his troops to you. I have to say, he trusted you too much. When we are alone, I don't like to hear you mention other men. So, I want to give you a punishment. Before Chu Qingyan could react, her eyes were occupied by a large black shadow. Her lips were cold, and he had already pressed down on her. She felt very innocent before she sank into the abyss. She was talking about serious matters. How could the Big Ice Block bully her? Sure enough, within 2 days, Sichuan Emperor couldn't withstand the pressure and sent someone to deliver a letter to Xiao Su. The letter didn't mention anything about what happened before. It only tactfully asked him to temporarily put aside his personal grudges and fight against the enemy together. Not for the imperial family, but for the common people he had protected for so many years. Chu Qingyan read the letter and wasn't happy. Zhong Wuyin has something to do. Xia Yingchun has nothing to do. A leopard can't change its spots. Huling said with righteous indignation. For so many years, Master has suffered a lot because of this. If Master still follows His Majesty's orders, I won't be the only one who can't stand it. Everyone will feel aggrieved. After saying this, Huling secretly glanced at Master, afraid that he would be angry. Chu Qingyan nodded heavily. I agree with Huling, but we are in a dilemma. If we help, His Majesty will have our weakness. If we don't help, wouldn't our efforts be in vain? Although the army was resting at the foot of the mountain and looked calm on the surface, it wasn't that they didn't do anything. In fact, a large group of people had secretly moved. Xiao Su raised his eyebrows. Isn't that simple? Let him wait for 2 days. The letter seemed to be persuasive and emotional, but it was still the same as before, using responsibility to restrain him. If he easily compromised, then he would be letting down his years of suffering and silence, and his brothers who had risked their lives for him. This time, he had to make the emperor correct his attitude and know that he wasn't easy to control. Even if he wanted to beg, he had to act like he was begging. The letter was sent out, but there was no reply. After 2 days, Sichuan Emperor's patience had been worn out. He fiercely slammed the memorial on the table and angrily said, "This unfilial son, does he want me to put down my status and beg him?" The emperor was so angry that the hall shook 3 times. Several ministers looked at each other and saw helplessness in each other's eyes. They all knew what His Majesty wrote in that letter. If they were the King of England, they wouldn't agree either. The country was in danger, but His Majesty was still putting on airs. What should they do? At this time, under the signal of the Minister of War, the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of War held the urgent military report and said with a dignified expression, "Your Majesty, the latest news from the front line, Luli City and Anqing City are about to fall." These words were like a basin of cold water poured over Sichuan Emperor's head. His exasperated anger was immediately extinguished. He raised his hand to cover his eyes and felt dizzy. His face was full of vicissitudes of life. He was unwilling to be humiliated, but also helpless. In the dark, it seemed that something was gradually out of control. "Xiao, prepare the brush and ink. Let me write another letter." Sichuan Emperor's voice suddenly sounded old. Chapter 1424. Big Ice Cube. There's something I don't understand. Looking at the person drawing on the map, Chu Qingyan wanted to recall the meeting with the generals to discuss how to resist the enemy country. She suddenly remembered a question that she had ignored before and couldn't help but support her chin with her hand. Xiao Su looked up and motioned for her to continue. She immediately said, "Why would Junlon cooperate with Nansong? I remember that 5 years ago, when we passed by Junlon, we helped Gentleman Sheng resolve the internal strife and let him sit firmly on the throne. Now that he's doing this, isn't he repaying evil with good?" Thinking of this, she felt that she had misjudged him back then. She had actually helped an ingrate. On the surface, he was smiling with you, but behind your back, he stabbed you. Xiao Su said disapprovingly, "The relationship between countries depends on interests, not relationships." Junlon experienced the rebellion of the vassals last time. In addition to the problems left behind by the previous emperor, the national treasury has long been empty. Water Spirit found out that in recent years, they have experienced drought, and there's been no harvest. Their national strength has declined, and they're no longer as strong as they were in the past. So when Junlon saw that we had good weather, abundant food, and the people lived and worked in peace, they coveted it. When Pang Huang proposed cooperation, it was exactly what he wanted. Otherwise, his troops wouldn't have come so quickly. He must have had this idea long ago. With his reminder, Chu Qingyan was able to piece together the pieces of her puzzle together to make a pretty good guess. Xiao Su nodded approvingly. When a country has reached the point where the people can't make a living, don't have enough to eat and wear, it's not surprising that they will do something. Chu Qingyan sneered. If we hadn't helped him back then, Junlon would have been split up by those vassals. Gentleman Sheng wouldn't be here today. Xiao Su raised his hand and patted her shoulder. There are no eternal enemies and no eternal friends. This is the imperial power. She pouted and nodded. Let's not talk about them. I have something to discuss with you. Go ahead. Xiao Su was a little surprised. Chu Qingyan giggled, hugged his arm, and said coquettishly, "Promise me first." Xiao Su looked at her calmly, then pulled his arm out of her hand and wagged his index finger in front of her face. "You're trying to curry favor for no reason. It's better if I don't listen." After he finished speaking, he walked out of the main tent with his hands behind his back. Chu Qingyan made a funny face at his back. The big ice cube was too smart. However, she would not give up on this matter. After giving herself some encouragement, she immediately chased after him. She didn't believe that she couldn't convince him today. 2 days later, when Chu Qingyan received Sichuan Emperor's reply, only her howling cavalry, Lai army, and the beast horde were left in the camp. However, on the surface, it still looked like an army of 100,000. After reading the contents of the letter, Chu Qingyan snorted. I really should let the big ice block read this letter. Sure enough, he was a flexible emperor. After being ignored by the big ice block for a few days, he immediately changed his attitude. She had never seen such a shameless person. Although she knew that he was only saying this because of the crisis that Sichuan was facing today and was not sincere, he was an old fox. It was already very difficult for him to go this far. She couldn't force him to do anything. Otherwise, things would go in the opposite direction. Chu Qingyan said to Jean Exant, "Send the letter that His Highness prepared before he left back to the capital." Jean Xian obeyed the order. As early as when the news of the 3 countries' encirclement came, the big ice block did not intend to sit back and do nothing. He had already begun to deploy in private. He had already sent people out, but on the surface, he was biding his time and negotiating with the Sichuan emperor to force him to state his position. This was the difference between active and passive. It also meant that the big ice block was no longer the King of England who could be easily manipulated. So yesterday, the big ice block left in advance with 100,000 troops to the north, leaving her to guard the camp. Now her task was completed. At this time, Ethereal lifted the curtain and came in, respectfully saying, "Little princess, this subordinate has prepared the medicine for your injuries. We can set off now." Chu Qingyan heard and nodded. She took the helmet that Xining handed over and put on. Then she walked out of the tent valiantly and stepped onto the high platform. Standing in the middle of the field, she looked down at her army. The Howling Cavalry and the Lai Army occupied half of the training field. Then there were Xiao and Bai Yutong, followed by a small team behind them. Chu Qingyan was solemn. "All teams report." Jean Exan stepped out with a serious face. "The Howling Cavalry is all here." Feng Lu stepped out and respectfully shouted, "The Lai Army is all here." Xiao stepped out and lazily responded, "Xiao, xiao, xiao, xiao." Bai Yutong stepped out and howled to the sky, "A woo, woo." If an outsider saw this scene, it would be hard to associate it with a military parade. They had never seen such a strange combination of troops. But it was this group of troops that would later write a legend. Chu Qingyan nodded in satisfaction and waved her arm. Break camp and set off. The plains were instantly cleaned up. If one didn't look carefully, they wouldn't be able to see that there had been an army here. Little Sea soared into the sky, craning its neck and calling out loudly. Those eagles that were resting in the forest immediately flapped their wings and flew towards it. Immediately, a black mass appeared, as if dark clouds were gathering, causing people to feel a chill in their hearts. Bai Yutong and the other 2 stood on the hillside and cried out a few times. Rustling sounds could be heard coming from the mountain forest. Not long after, all the ferocious beasts that could be called out with extreme lethality appeared, following behind them in an orderly manner. It was hard to imagine that they would have such an obedient side. Chu Qing rode her warhorse and looked back in the opposite direction. She didn't know where the big ice block and the others were now. She didn't know when they would meet again after this parting. She couldn't help but think of the conversation she had with him 2 days ago. "Big ice block, leave the Lulan army to me," she discussed with him. "No," Xiao Su rejected without even thinking about it. She didn't get angry and said seriously, "Big ice block, you know very well that they have poisonous creatures. I have a herd of beasts. I have a better chance of winning against them." Xiao Su also stared at her seriously. "It's because they are poisonous creatures and not humans that you're not suitable to go. Beasts can deal with humans, but they have the same effect against poisonous creatures as humans. No, Bai Yutong and the others are more agile than humans, and they're smaller targets. They're also animals and won't have a fear of poisonous creatures like humans." So Chu Qingyan looked up with bright eyes. "This time, it has to be me." Xiao Su was choked by her words. That's right, there was no better choice than the little fellow. In the end, he reached out and pulled her into his arms. He had never used so much strength before, as if he wanted to embed her into his bones. The 2 didn't speak. In the end, he took a deep breath and closed his eyes, saying softly, "Okay." That night, he pestered her and tore her apart again and again. He couldn't wait and was extremely passionate and domineering. She felt like she was a dish that he patiently tasted over and over again. When she woke up the next day, he was no longer on the bed, and there was not a single part of her body that was intact. It was clear how ruthless he was. Her thoughts returned to the army in front of her. She pursed her lips and gripped the reins tightly. It was a small separation, but they would be reunited soon. Her red clothes and black hair fluttered in the wind. She smiled confidently. Hiya, that you're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.